Welcome, everybody. We come back at 6:18. We are here for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Secretary,
Please
lead
stand.
us in the pledge.
Please stand. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Broadcast statement by our student member, Ang Osen.
This meeting of the Sacramento City School Board is being recorded in its entirety and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air Sunday, October 6th at 6 p.m. and Monday, October 7th at 6 p.m. and also webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. We welcome members of the audience to address the board. Please complete a speaker form located in the back of the community room and give them to our communications representative, along with any handouts you may have for the board prior to the conclusion of the item's presentation. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please limit comments during public comment to items that are not on the agenda. If you do comment on an item that is on the agenda, we will ask that you please defer your comments until your item comes up on the agenda. Please also turn off your cell phones or place them on silent or vibrate. Thank you.
Thank you. Stellar student recognition, Mr. Parker Van Ostrom, CK McClatchy High School. Ms. Morosky, would you do me the honor?
Thank you very much. It's truly my honor to welcome Parker Van Ostrand and you're welcome to come up to the podium. Right there.
Center stage. Behind.
Oh, other side, yeah. You can show him where. Parker is a young man of many, many talents. He's a junior in the HISP program at McClatchy High School. He has a 4.4 GPA. He graduated 8th grade as the Maryhill Middle School valedictorian. And while he was in 8th grade, he took AP Calculus at McClatchy, and he's currently completing the math curriculum at Sacramento City College. Because by the time he was a junior, he made it through all that McClatchy had to offer. He is a mathlete and has been the vice president of the mathletes team since his sophomore year. Has also received a Vula Steinberg Mathlete Award. But that's just the start. He's been studying piano since the age of 4. He's performed at Carnegie Hall at age 5 after winning first place in a competition, and I'm embarrassing him so much now. But it takes a while to read through all of his accomplishments, even as a junior at McClatchy. He has performed and competed all over the world. In 2018, he was invited to tour Europe with the California Youth Symphony, with performances all over Eastern Europe. He attended the Philadelphia Young Pianist Academy, where he won first place in the Philadelphia International Piano Competition. And he hopes to continue performing and pursuing this passion in college. And a mathlete, pianist, and also an athlete. He's a member of the cross country and track and field team, MVP in the freshman, sophomore cross country and track and field team, and outstanding sophomore. He wants to run a marathon, Boston. Yeah. Given all that he's accomplished at such a young age, I'm very sure you will, and I'm very sure you'll do quite well as well. So I really appreciate you being here, Parker. It's really my honor to be able to welcome you to our meeting and recognize you. And without further ado, I would like to, if you're willing, to have us play a short clip of his performance, his award-winning performance at the Philadelphia International Piano Competition. So this was really beautiful, and I may have cried a little bit when I watched it for the first time because it's really stunning. So. So hopefully the technology will work, and otherwise we might have to find a piano and drag it in here. Well, while they're looking for the technology, maybe I can ask you to tell us a little bit, and just to invite you to say hello. And here we go. Okay. You want to play it first? Okay. That was incredible. Maybe would you like to tell us a little bit about that piece and about how performing was in Philadelphia?
Yeah. So this summer in August, I attended the Philadelphia Young Pianist Academy. It was 10 days at the Curtis Institute of Music, which is a music school. And we got to work with really famous teachers that I really wanted to work with. And during the festival, there was a competition for each of the participants. There was 21 of us, and there was like a junior division and a senior division. And so I did the junior division, and there were like 2 rounds, and the final round was like a complete concerto with an accompanist, which was a great experience.
Wow.
And so after I got the first place, I was invited to perform on the radio station of Philadelphia, the WRTI, the following day after the competition. And it was my first time kind of doing that kind of experience, which was really exciting, but it was also kind of scary because it was, for the radio broadcast, and they had all kinds of like cameras and radio equipment in there. But it was broadcasted for the whole city, and I shared it with like everyone at home to listen to. And the piece I played was by Chopin, the second scherzo. It's a piece I really like. I played it first when I was like 12 years old, and then I recently brought it back to bring to Philadelphia to work with a teacher who specializes in music by Chopin. So it's a piece I've had a lot of performances with, so it was really nice to play it for the radio and play it in a concert there after the competition. So
Wonderful. Well, it didn't look like you were fazed one bit by all the lights and the attention.
Thank you.
Parker was just telling me, when you are performing, you just get into the flow and let it take you through. And I just wanted to recognize my mother-in-law and sons are here tonight because I was so inspired by Parker that I wanted to invite my sons to meet him and see what you can do if you really put your mind to it. So without further ado, I'd like to present this certificate. And thank you all so much for helping me on the Parker.
Item 5, announcement of action taken in closed session.
Yes, Mr. President Pro Tem, there are 3 announcements I have out of closed session. The first 2, by a vote of 6-0 with Board President Ryan absent, approved 2 special education settlement agreements known as OAH case number 2019-040251 and 2019-070618. The third announcement I have out of closed session is that the board, by a vote of 5 affirmative votes, with Board Member Lisa Morawski absent and Board President Jesse Ryan absent, approved readmission regarding expulsion numbers 1, 5, 6, 10, 11, and 14, and denied readmission for reasons I cannot give in open session regarding expulsions 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 12, and 13. That concludes the announcements out of closed session, Mr. President Pro Tem.
Thank you. Agenda adoption. Before I move to adopt the agenda, as board president, it's come to my attention, or board vice president, it's come to my attention that after the agenda was posted, the bid award for Floyd Farms to Landmark Construction had not been listed on tonight's consent agenda. Given that the project will be in close proximity to the Sacramento River, any measurable amount of rain would substantially increase the cost and delay in completing this project. Accordingly, I request that the board add this item to the consent agenda, item 12.0, as there is need to take immediate action to approve this award. I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Preferential student member? Aye. Aye. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carries. Special, item 7. Special.
Actually, we need to do agenda adoption.
Oh,
Can I step in?
yes.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move this agenda in recognition of Ms. Cathy Allen. I was just told today that she will be moving on to retirement, and this will be her last board meeting with us. So she will be sorely missed, and I believe that there are some staff that like to come up to say a few words as well. Do we have, maybe, Nathaniel? Did they not make it? Okay, okay. Well, as chair of the facilities committee, I've worked closely with Cathy, so I just wanted to say how much we appreciate, and we have an apple for your service. So if you could meet me down, and we will present it.
Yeah.
Over there.
Do one of these before.
Yeah, well, first and last time, I guess.
Pictures, yeah. Right, Daryl, you photo bomb me? Yeah.
I'm gonna do the bunny ears over Cathy's head. Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, I do want to just say a couple things. It's been a wonderful 6.5 years. We've accomplished an awful lot. I do specifically want to call out a few other people that retired earlier this year. So Jim Dobson, our Director of Facilities Planning and Construction, and Barry Evepak, our Director of Facilities Maintenance and Resource Management, and Kent Jones, our Manager of Operations, all retired a little bit earlier, and among the 3 of them represent over 90 years in this district. Kent Jones actually, I can legitimately say, started as a kindergartner, graduated from the school district, and then went on to become a custodian and ended up leaving us as Manager of Operations. So an awful lot of institutional knowledge has left. So 2 of my 4 rock star directors have gone on to retirement, but I'm sure we'll get some people in that can keep the good work going. So really appreciate the opportunity to work with the board and the community, and super proud of everything we've done, and hope to be able to read about good things that continue down the road. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Cathy.
It's okay. Ms. Helen, I just want to thank you on behalf of all of our staff here in Sac City Unified. Ms. Helen is a leader in her field and serves on many boards, advisory, and otherwise as well. So thank you for your service to Sac City Unified, and we look forward to staying connected.
Agenda item 7, special presentation. 7.1, approve resolution 3106, recognition of October as National Principals Month. Kunzi.
Hi, and joining me this evening to present this resolution are two of our HR directors, Christina Villegas and Dr. Tiffany Smith-Simmons.
Good evening, Superintendent and board members. Tonight, it gives us great pleasure to recognize our school site principals in recognition of National Month of the Principal. We know that leadership is filled with true, deep grit work. We know that our school leaders work tirelessly to develop and create meaningful spaces for learning and growing. Therefore, on behalf of the Sacramento City School District, we thank you, and it is our pleasure and honor to present to you this resolution.
Resolution 3106. Whereas the month of October has been designated throughout the nation as National Principal Month, and whereas educated public serves as a foundation of our democracy, and whereas our principals touch, mold, and mentor so many lives with a lasting effect, and whereas excellence in our state and district begins with our principals, and whereas principals overcome obstacles and challenges daily to make a difference in the lives of our students and families. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Education commends our principals and encourages parents in the community to recognize the efforts of principals as we celebrate for the month of October as National Principals Month.
And we'd like to invite up a few individuals to accept the recognition on behalf of all of our hardworking principals in the district. So Rich Owens, Marla Van Laningham, and I thought I saw Doyle Martin. Please come up and join us.
On behalf of United Professional Educators, Jim Peterson is here somewhere. Come on up, Jim. I know you didn't know it, but anyway. So on behalf of United Professional Educators and all the hardworking principals, we want to say thank you for this. Our president, Judy Montgomery Verena, her new name, couldn't be here. Had an urgent CPS item at the school. I just left myself from that school, so she wanted to be here. But we do appreciate the recognition and the acknowledgement of the hard work and the many hours that principals spend at schools. You have no idea, some of you do, how many hours it takes Saturdays, Sundays, after school, staying. Doyle was late because he had to stay to wait for somebody to get picked up. So Jim, is the same experience. So thank you very much, and we do appreciate it. It's a good honor. One of our principals would like to say a word or two? No, they don't want to, so thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right.
Wait. You have to move it.
I'll move it.
Second? Those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, preferential vote? Okay, motion carries. Approve Resolution 3107, recognition of National Heritage, Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th, 2019. Members members Garcia and member Vang?
Yes, thank you. We are honored to join this month with all the principals. This is in recognition of National Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th. So I'll just read a little bit about the resolution. Whereas Sac City Unified School District serves more than 18,000 Hispanic students, or about 40% of our student population. And whereas Hispanic Americans have made a profound contributions and continue to make advances in our community, state, and the world, including education, medicine, art, culture, public service, economics and development, human rights, and politics. And whereas Sac City Unified School District Board of Education recognizes the positive influences of Hispanics have made on our country and our community through their strong commitment to family, faith, hard work, and service, and commends the many local community organizations that support their progress, enrich their culture, and celebrate the multi-ethnic and multicultural customs of the Hispanic communities. Now therefore, let it be resolved that the Sacramento City Unified Board of Education declares September 15th through October 15th, 2019 as National Hispanic Heritage Month and recognizes the contributions of local Hispanic leaders, district staff, students, and their families. Be it further resolved that appropriate classroom activities take place that illustrate the value, the role, and the contributions of Hispanics to the local and national economies, culture, and identity. Thank you.
And in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month, we want to take this opportunity to also recognize one of our amazing teacher. I have known her for about 4 or 5 years, and she does incredible work with our students at Luther Burbank. And so we would like her to come up, Ms. Elizabeth Villanueva, if she can come up here with her students. I'm just going to take this time just to read a little bit about Ms. Villanueva. So as you all know, she is a passionate, committed leader at Luther Burbank High School in Sacramento, where she teaches 9th and 12th grade. This is her 16th year teaching here. She has been successful in working with full gamut of skill levels from the lower level classes, often with behavioral challenging students, all the way up to our IB and AP Spanish students. She has led an after-school program called New Age Latinas, which teaches young Latinas strategies for leadership, success, healthy choices, and navigating the world of secondary and post-secondary education. She exposes these young Latina students to a variety of community events and college trips to enhance their academic journey and Latina voice and identity. She also leads a support group for DACA recipients and undocumented students and families. She has organized parents' engagement events to really empower them by educating about the importance of being involved in their children's education. She has also helped with Know Your Rights events for undocumented and documented community, and also literacy workshop. She has spent most of her tenure at Burbank as the World Language Department Chair. She has received numerous awards, including Sac City Unified Teacher of the Year Award, the California Teacher Association Equity and Human Rights Award, the Cesar Chavez Cise Bueda Human Rights Award, and the National Educational Association Social Justice Activist Award finalist, and also the Teach Plus Fellowship from 2019 to 2020. Elizabeth has a BA and a teaching credential from CSU Stanislaus and an MA from CSU Sacramento, and is currently a doctoral candidate in the Department of Education, Learning, and Instruction with an emphasis on heritage language maintenance at the University of San Francisco. Please give a round of applause for Ms. Villanueva.
Thank you. Member Vang, before Ms. Villanueva, I did also want to acknowledge Member Vang, you introduced me to Ms. Villanueva very early in my tenure. I think I was still in my transition period, and I had the opportunity to see her work in action, working with our Dreamer students at Luther Burbank, and I can attest to her advocacy on behalf of all students, but in particular of our unprotected immigrant students, and have been impressed with her work. She is someone that is constantly reminding us of our obligation to our neediest students. So I do want to thank you for that commitment, Ms. Villanueva.
Thank you, Garcia.
Buenas tardes. In Lakesh Kalakin, tú eres mi otro yo, yo soy tu otro tú. You are my other me, and I am your other you. That is my principle as a teacher, my guidance. And today, I'm very honored to be here with my students, my family, my community, to celebrate not just the Hispanic Heritage Month, because I ask, what does it mean to be Hispanic? Tell me, can you define that? No, I'm sure you cannot, because I can't. Hispanic, how does it look like? It looks like you, like you, like you, like everybody here. And as an educator, I constantly remind myself, what is my purpose to be here? Why am I here? Am I gonna celebrate just one person? Am I gonna fight just for one person's right? No. As an educator, I have a purpose, a commitment, an obligation. But beyond that, I have a passion that transcends. And I hope that my teachings go beyond a skin color, beyond this physical language that I'm trying to learn, that I continue learning, because I came here like many, many of us, if not all of us here, for something better, for a better future. I'm very grateful to my principal, Kim Peterson, for being here. I'm very grateful for all of you, for all my community to provide. But let's not forget that if we dedicate 1 month, 1 day for one group, we forget about the others, because our district is not composed just by Hispanic. Our district is composed by many, many students who are forgotten also. And this is just a reminder for all of us here present to not forget the presence of all of us. Let's continue striving. Let's continue doing our best effort. Like when I asked Mr. Peterson, I said, Mr. Peterson, Jim, one of my students asked me, how come we're not celebrating the Hispanic Heritage Month? Girl, wait a minute. Are you learning that in your history teacher? No. What? And then I asked the other teachers, no, Maestra, we're not learning about that. How can we forget? How can we forget about one another? That's the question. What is our obligation as humans, beyond skin color? And I'm very grateful to Mr. Peterson, who is open to dialogue. And because of that, he's trying his best effort to provide a deeper sense of consciousness with collaboration, collective level consciousness. So thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you to all of you, because we gotta appreciate one another. Let's not forget that. Thank you.
So, do you have a
Y no me
second?
olvido de mis raíces ni del lenguaje, ¿ok? Va más allá. Y lo que dije, y lo siento, un lenguaje no tiene algo físico, se transmite, es energía. Gracias.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries.
I got you covered. Don't worry. Thank you. Oh, get in your family? Yeah. Did you bring your family? Yeah, get in. The family together. Yeah, get in.
Por favor.
Get everybody in there. You got everyone, Alex?
Gracias. Nos vemos de nuevo.
Sí, nos vemos
pronto.
Sí, primero Dios.
Okay.
Brings us to item 8, public comment. We have any public comment?
Yes, we do. We have 3 public comments. If you could line up when you hear your name called, please. Angel Garcia, followed by Maria Rodriguez and Cecile Nunley.
Good evening, board member, superintendent. So I'd first like to start by acknowledging and giving thanks to the Nisenan, Maidu, Miwok, Miwok, Padwin, Wintun, Wintu people that have cared for this land thousands of years, but for those who came to this land. I'd also like to acknowledge that it's Indigenous Peoples Day on October 14th, and November is Native American Heritage Month. Both of these events are opportunities for the district and school sites to acknowledge, engage in activities to improve climate, improve student knowledge of history of First Nations people. This was especially important since a new report was just put together by the Sacramento Native American Higher Education Collaborative and the Community College Equity Assessment Lab at San Diego State University, highlighting the issues that I feel have been largely ignored but clearly documented in California. This new disparaging report highlights the inequities in K-12 education of Native children, particularly in the areas of suspension and expulsion. Many groups have advocated through the years on behalf of brown and black students in California and in Sac City Unified. However, specifically, Native students have largely been ignored in the conversation related to graduation, discipline, attendance, college career readiness. I'm trying to hurry so I can finish. Without even a recognition of the disparities and issues that overwhelmingly affect Native students in the state of California. This will surely continue without even a discussion about improvement. A key point that you would want to take into consideration is that Sac City Unified has been noted in the report of having a moderate concern in terms of suspension and expulsion of Native students. Though we are not among the 4 districts listed in the database as an urgent concern in Sacramento County, we still were noted as moderate. Thank you so much. Some of the key recommendations, she just gave me her time. Some of the key recommendations in the report include professional development training for all K-12 teachers, a culturally calibrated process for student suspension that considers Native American cultural beliefs and values, working collaboratively with parents and tribal officials to discuss issues that lead to suspension and expulsions, involving Native American students and their voice in proactive discussions among school officials about policies and practices that discriminate and target Native American children, engaging disciplinary issues from a restorative justice lens that invites conversation, healing, and justice rather than penalization and fear, and the creation of a memorandum of understanding between the school districts and local tribes, some I just mentioned. This memoranda should provide opportunities for tribal-specific data sharing on suspensions, expulsions, hiring of Native American staff, and ways the school will commit to developing educators to improve outcomes for Native American children and youth. In the midst of the changes of the work that we're trying to do, and hope that will happen, and the work that we lobby for on behalf of brown and black students, we must also advocate more thoughtfully and intentionally for our Native students. We must engage Sac City Unified Native parents of Native children and acknowledge them. They feel ignored, so we need to make sure that they're empowered to have a voice. I plan to do my part, but I ask that each of you read the press release and report. I sent that to 4 board members. Look over the database in the report, and I also ask that the board request a presentation on this report in addition to the summary of how we are serving our Native students in Sac City Unified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Vice President Wu, Superintendent Aguilar, and members of the school board. Tonight, I'm Maria Rodriguez every night, but tonight I'm sporting my vintage 2010 Sam Brannan music band t-shirt. Absolute awesomeness. So I'm here to talk about music and why I think we need to replicate the music programs that are happening at Sam Brannan and JFK. I can't go into details with my limited time, but I think that being in the band addresses issues like social emotional learning and family and community engagement. I also think it is a draw for enrollment. When my son was entering junior high, we looked at junior highs, and he was going to go only to the school that Mr. Hammond was at, the music teacher. As high school approached, we looked outside of the district. We looked at private schools, but again, it was like Mr. Hammond was starting at JFK, and they were going to go there. And we didn't even go to any other schools for my second son because it was going to be follow Mr. Hammond. So I think it's a draw for enrollment. I've done a quick study. I think that that program is a profit center. You have 2 teachers teaching 125 students. I've done the calculations roughly. Granted, I'm a novice at this, but I think it probably generates $125,000 a year easy, not to mention the fact that the parents' organization brings in $75,000 to pay for things like buses and instruments that the school district gets to keep. Also, it's a lifelong learning thing. At the age of 50 this year, I started playing in a bell choir. I learned musical notes when I was young, and I still remember them now. And it's the one part of my week where I can just block everything out and focus on music with other people. And it's a joy. I think it's wonderful that I get to speak tonight after hearing Parker. I think that there is a connection between math learning and music. There's no reason that these programs should be sacrificed. I think they should be developed from the elementary school on up. And I do have a picture, but I can't get to it, of you, Vice President Wu, helping the JFK band with some funds. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Vice President Wu, Superintendent, and board members. I just wanted, this one is probably a symbolic thing, but October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I don't know that I've ever seen a resolution, even though it's symbolic, about breast cancer awareness. Some of you may know that I am a breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed April 27th, 2012 with stage 3 breast cancer. Something that does happen, and the statistics are that 1 in 8 women will be affected by breast cancer throughout her life. There are 6 of you, well, there's 5 of you right now, and with President Ryan, there's 6 of you. If you include the ladies on the dais, that's at least 1 to 2 of you will be affected by breast cancer in your lifetime. You have 40,000 students, 40,235. If you figure about half of them, 1 in 8, you're going to have 2,500 of your students in this school district that will be affected by breast cancer throughout their lives. You have 3,800 staff. And if you do the math, as far as about 70% are female, because a high percentage are female, 1 in 8, it's about 300 of your staff will be affected by breast cancer in their lifetime. Your title for this organization is called a local educational agency. Your name is Sacramento City Unified, but you're a local educational agency, which means education for the entire community. And so I urge you, and I'm asking respectfully, if you would consider putting a resolution before the board as symbolic, and I understand, but also the biggest form of helping those with this disease is prevention. And I think it's something that needs to be made aware for this district, if you could possibly put a resolution before the board for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Thank you.
We actually just received 3 comment cards. Alma Lopez, Fanny Castellanos, and Anthony Macias.
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Fanny Castellanos. Soy madre soltera de 3 hijos y estoy aquí porque mi hijo Anthony Macías tuvo una pelea el jueves pasado, una pelea de la que no pudo zafarse, no tuvo alternativa, y las consecuencias de esa pelea fue que lo clausuraron de clases, lo expulsaron. Después yo me enteré como 4 horas después de que él estaba expulsado, se lo entregaron a alguien más. Yo fui a buscar al director y él dijo que Anthony era como un criminal, que no podía estar ahí, pero que como yo había ido, él iba a dar medios días para atrás. Él tiene derecho a 4 clases y en clase lo tratan como alguien tiene que acompañarlo al lonche, lo sacan 10 minutos antes de terminar cada clase. Eso es como si él fuera un criminal o peor. Es muy, muy triste. Yo me siento mal. Yo sé que él no tenía que pelear. No justifico su pelea, pero creo que es muy injusto la forma en cómo se le está tratando. Pareciera como que no tiene derechos, como que decir la verdad, porque yo fui la que fui a hablar. Yo hice llamadas para que el director supiera que mi hijo había tenido una pelea y que yo tenía pendiente de que pasaran más cosas, que quería que estuviera resguardado a la salida de la escuela. Y él hizo todo lo contrario, él lo sacó de la escuela y lo trató mal. Yo me siento muy triste y yo quiero, si él puede regresar a sus horas completas, porque su nivel académico es bajo y ahora él pasa como 6 horas solo en casa porque yo tengo que trabajar para ellos. Solo es lo que necesitaba decir y que lo tomaran en cuenta. Gracias.
Can I support in translating a little bit? Okay.
So her name is Fanny Castellanos. She's the mother of Anthony Macias. He goes to Cal Middle. She's a single mother of 3 children. There was a fight that Anthony was involved in, and the consequences for Anthony are extreme. He was going to be expelled. She did not find out about the fight until like 4 hours later, and there was somebody else who was called to pick up Anthony. So she found out about the fight 4 hours later. Once she feels that her son is being treated as a criminal. Once she went and spoke to the assistant principal, he said that because she had shown up, he was going to allow Anthony to be in the school half a day. But when he's in school, he's always being escorted. He's being escorted to lunch, and then escorted out of the school. She feels that he's being treated as a criminal. She understands that he made a wrong choice. It's not to justify the fight, but she doesn't believe that these are the consequences that he should be given. She feels that it seems like he has no rights. She tried calling the assistant principal to tell him what happened, because she was really worried about the fight and the consequences. But instead of being supported, she feels that the assistant principal is doing all the opposite. And so she's here to ask for some level of support to see what she needs to do to allow him to go back to school full time. She's mostly working, so when he gets home from school, she's still working, so she can't fully support him when it comes to like the academics. But she's just here to let you know that she's really worried. She wants to know how can he get back his education so he's in school full time. And then I'm gonna let Anthony share what he wanted to share. And then I have just something to share myself.
Okay, my name is Anthony. I attend Cal, and I was in a fight I think it was Thursday or Friday. I don't remember completely sure, but I was defending one of my friends. And the day after, when I got to school, our vice principal, Mr. Zarate, took me out of class for like 5 minutes or so. I explained to him what happened. He acted like very nice and everything. And he told me if I knew anything else to come and talk to him so he could help me out. And then 5 minutes later, when I got back in class, he called me back. He started talking to me like if I was a criminal. He started telling me that I would cause all the problems in school, that I was the only one who acted like this, that I didn't do anything right. And after that, when he told me to walk out of his office, then he pulled me back in. He started checking everything. He told me to pull my pants up, to take off my belt and my shoes. He was checking if I had anything on me to get me, like, I guess, more in trouble. And since that day, he's been giving me half days. And I've been getting taken out of class 10 minutes early. I've been escorted to the cafeteria to get my lunch and out of class only a few times, but mostly all the time. And the only person who's helped me a lot was one of the teachers. Her name is Ms Sanchez. She's been helping me and stuff, and she was in my schedule, but she got taken out, and I feel like it's hard for me to get work in class done. I try my best, and she's been helping me a lot through there, but since I got my half days, I got that class taken away, and I was asking if I could get my classes back so I could get better in my grades and things like that. And I was also asking if there could be more people like her to help us out and feel like we're comfortable enough to talk to other older people. That's all I have.
Okay. We have Stefan in the back. When you leave, I'd like if you could talk to him.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll make a quick remark just in terms of what happened. I just met the family. They told me about the case. But I just want to point out that when you have a very dehumanizing and criminalizing narrative coming from the federal government, and at a very, very local level, you're being treated like this, when I believe there should be alternatives to how we're supporting the students when there's bad choices, that we should do something about it. So we'll definitely talk to the gentleman that you pointed out. And as a side note, I know that the conversation about SROs keeps coming back, and it should. I think it's something that it's a conversation that needs to happen. And if the district is thinking or should be thinking about doing a conversation at the community level where both different community perspectives are at the table to have a conversation, because I think there's different perspectives where we're not really listening to one another. So I think that's a suggestion that I'd like to point out. Thank you.
Any more?
We have one more comment from Kenya Martinez.
Good evening. I planned on reading the CAC report later this evening, but for some reason you changed around the report. I do not know why that happened. I would like an answer to that. If not, then I would like to read my report now.
It's on there.
Yeah, but it's later on. Before we had, I thought it was this, we went over this, that it was going to be before.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. So if the clock can start over again with 2 minutes, I'll read it. Good evening, members of the board. The Community Advisory Committee would like to thank Board Member Morawski, Chief Academic Officer Christine Beta, and our new CBO, Rose Ramos, for attending our last meeting. And also thank you, Maya Vang, for passing out flyers at the Latino Festival, the Sunday that the CAC meeting was to occur. We ran a new format in the first hour called Parent to Parent, which was a complete success. We had a number of new parents who attended the CAC meeting for the first time and was graciously supported by our Special Education Director, Becky Bryant, and Supervisor Sarah Daw. In this last meeting, we announced and took nominations for the member-at-large position, which is currently open. Elections will take place during the business portion of the second half of our CAC meeting on October 15th at 7 p.m. On the same evening at 6 p.m., we will host our parent-to-parent meeting, which will be conducted in Spanish. This meeting will be facilitated by our treasurer, Rose McAlfee, and our parliamentarian, Al Santana, and we invite all community members to attend. Translation services will be available in English and childcare will be available. The CAC recently requested from the Special Education Department copies of any and all correspondence and or documents which the district has transmitted to the CDE as evidence of completion and progress towards completion of each and many of the student level and LEA level compliance findings. We are happy to forward you our specific concerns in a direct email. The realization of this ask comes during a time in which the Special Education Department is experiencing a shortage in staffing, which is why we demand you make the Special Education Department a crucial priority. We request human resources to actively employ headhunter services to secure vital positions such as special education supervisors, special education teachers, instructional aides, teachers for the visually impaired, assistive technology specialists, speech therapists, school psychologists, and any vacant positions which has been listed and remains unfilled in the last 6 months. In addition, we request the Human Resources Department vet all applicants during the initial interview process. It is our wish to continue to work collaboratively with our community partners, which include the members of this board.
Thank you.
No additional comments.
Seeing that there is no other public comment, we will move on to public hearings. 9.1, hearing and approval of the 1920 adopted budget revision. Rose. Both of you.
Good evening, board members, superintendent, members of the public. Tonight, Jackie Canfield and I will be presenting the 2019-20 proposed revised adopted budget. And let's see, let me go to the first slide. Oops, sorry. Where's this? Aim which way?
No. After.
Thank you. Sorry about that delay. All right, this is basically an agenda for tonight's presentation. We're going to quickly take you through this slide. We were first going to share with you the purpose of this proposed revised adopted budget, and then we're going to share also some communication that we received from the Sacramento County Office of Education, known as SCOE. Then we'll briefly go into the summary of the multi-year projections, just showing you the difference between the adopted budget and the revised budget. This is going to be a really simple one-page spreadsheet just to show you the changes in the reserves. And then Jackie's going to discuss the specific details that changed the budget, this revised budget. And then we'll go into the SAC's multi-year official state report along with the recommended multi-year plan. And then we'll conclude with the summary and go into the official public hearing. So the first, okay, so here is the purpose of the proposed revised adopted budget. As you know, the district's 2019-20 adopted budget was just approved by SCOE for the reason that we all are familiar with, which is that the 21-22 unrestricted general fund balance had a negative ending fund balance. And in order to not have that, we have to have a positive balance and meet our 2% required reserve. So what that did was trigger Ed Code 42127, which requires a district to develop and approve a revised adopted budget by October 8th, which is why we're here this evening. And then we'll go into the public notice and the public hearing as required. This also allowed the district to go ahead and update the budget with latest information, which we do have, and we'll be sharing that a little later in the presentation. So we also received this communication from SCOE, which was very nice. It recognized the progress the district has made to date. Some of the comments include considerable progress to stabilize the budget since the 2018 adopted budget. SCOE recognized the reductions that the district did make, but did note that they were not sufficient enough to remove the structural deficit, and so we still have to continue to look for a solution. Also noted was that the district did resolve some of the cash insolvency issues, but it was just delayed. It wasn't completely resolved. So we'll discuss that a little later as well. And then SCOE further acknowledged that the district did make some improvements in certain processes, namely enrollment projections. The district is working with Decision Insight to really tighten those up and get a better handle on the projections, as well as the hiring and the purchasing. The district does meet on a regular basis, weekly, with a purchasing review committee, which does include cabinet-level staff, as well as SCOE's fiscal advisor to review some of these items. And then the district did fill the two key positions, the CBO and the Chief Academic Officer. So that was quite a bit of work the district has done. And some suggested next steps mentioned in the letter also from SCOE were to accelerate negotiations, hire and train budget and payroll staff to stay current on all required reporting, document the one-stop staffing process, and streamline hiring to ensure that the budget is accurate. Evaluate staffing ratios, class sizes, caseloads, and regular and specialty programs for costs and limited opportunities for students. Adhere to the budget calendar, and then continue to improve our budget assumption documentation and disclosure. And this is the one page, that looks like it's missing something. This is, yeah, okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay, the other half. This is the one-page summary I was just mentioning about the differences between what you saw in June when the budget was adopted versus today. So the line I'd like to take you to, which is the really important line, is that third line from the top called the reserve level. In June, going over to the very right, the district was projecting to end 21-22 with a negative percent reserve of 2.63%. Today, we're presenting a revised budget. If you go all the way down that same column, the very last one, a negative 1.35%, clearly an improvement from what you saw in June. Not out of the woods. We're still in the negative. It's still red. We have work to do, but the district is making progress to improving that negative. We're going to go into details about what got us there, and this next slide is going to transition into the work that the district did to get us to this point, which is budget adjustments or some reductions. And we've organized this hopefully in a user-friendly manner. We have an ongoing current year, which means that those reductions or adjustments were applicable to that current year. And then the second column, they were applicable to future years. And then the one time. So we wanted to make sure that we distinguish the three columns. And we just briefly mentioned the items that are listed there, but they're included in more detail in the executive summary if you would like to look at that. So I'm not going to go over too much of this since we have so much information, but I'll touch on a couple, the major ones. So starting back in December when the district was alerted of the situation, it took action to make some adjustments. And so you'll look at the top line in December of 2018, the district made adjustments of $17.5 million in ongoing. And then the one time that year was $3.6 million, and those items are listed there for you. So just continuing on, you can see, every other month or so, the district continued to work towards making some reductions. February, March, there was that 7.8. May of 2019, there was a series of reductions there, some of them ongoing for the current year, future year, and one time. And then in June, when you saw the budget, there was an additional $2.9 million. And then today, we're bringing you a revised budget that includes some additional work that we've done, the district has done, $1 million in ongoing for the current year, and then $6 million in one time. So in summary, that bottom line will show the cumulative work that the district has done. For the current year of 18-19, it was almost $30 million. And then for the future years, another 20, and then in one time, 12 million. Oops, yeah, there. So, if you want to sum it up, the ongoing came out to about $50.2 million, and then for the one-time 12, so altogether about $62.3 million. Pretty significant, but as you saw in the previous slide, not enough to achieve the reserve that we need. So this is just a summary of the changes that you're going to hear about in this proposed revised adopted budget. So we just kind of summed them up for you so you can see the work that's been done by the district. The district in this budget is recognizing additional state one-time revenues, one-time expenditures, increase in local income and contract reductions, recognition of additional 9.2% cost for restructuring the teacher salary schedule for substitutes and stipends, and then recognizing additional teaching positions and utilizing restricted funds for teachers above the baseline. This would be like your Title I, your SIG, and your restricted resources that are allowed to be used in this fashion. Also included is the cash flows, which shows positive cash through October 2020, but again, we start to have those issues in October 21. So there's the delay, but not completely eliminated the risk. And then the revised multi-year projection, although like we said, it's improved, but we still have that negative ending fund balance in that final year, 21-22. So in summary, we need a solution of $27 million, which is what the district has been sharing for some time now, which is a pretty large amount. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie. She's going to go over the details on the changes in the current year budget.
Good evening, everyone. So some of this information is a repeat, but I just wanted to make sure before I actually go any further is that we are focusing on changes since the adopted budget. So anything that was presented to the board and the board adopted in June is still included in this budget. So I wanted to make sure that everyone realized that nothing has been taken out. Unless we specifically talk about something, but nothing has been taken out. We are adding to and revising. And so I wanted to just make sure that was clear to everyone, including the audience. So back in August, we did present to you the increase in state revenues that had been brought forward from the final state budget. So that included lottery dollars of $120,000. It also included some one-time funds for special education equalization of 2.2 and included special ed preschool of 4.2. When we first came to you in August, we put the 4.2 on the restricted general fund because we thought that's where it was supposed to be, but we've gotten clarification since then. And so the proposed revised budget includes it on the unrestricted side as per the guidance. In addition, some new items with the closing of the books in 2019, we were able to review our interest income, which did come in higher. We did another projection based upon what we believed our cash balances would be, and we feel comfortable adding $589,000 more in interest for the 19-20 budget. And again, as we continue to refine all the different revenues as well as expenditures, we looked at revenues to see if there was any revenues that we had not recognized in 19-20 that we could plan on based upon what we experienced in 1819. And so this includes $100,000, which is income that is received from fingerprints. So that is a regular type of revenue that does come in. As far as expenditures since the original adopted budget, as has been mentioned, over this summer, we've been working with SCTA to get clarification on the arbitration decision. And based upon that, we did create the salary schedules that everyone has agreed upon for 1920. Well, based upon that, there is Article 12 in the CBA language that calls for what the payment should be for substitutes and stipends in Article 12, and that increase amounted to $1.3 million, and that had not been included in the original adopted budget. And so, as such, it is being put forth in the revised proposed adopted budget to all of you. In addition, since we met, we have opened school. We have gone through the staff leveling process with all of our schools, and based upon the enrollment at some individual schools and some program needs, we've added 22.2 FTE teachers at different sites. In addition, when we were looking at all of the existing positions, if a school didn't qualify for the teacher based upon staffing parameters, but the district wanted to leave the teacher there for specific reasons, again, like a bilingual program or something like that, we looked at the funding, and based upon that, we were able to move some positions from unrestricted general fund to Title I and to SIG. So we have an additional 30 positions that moved over to Title I. So while we had an increase in teacher positions, they're not all funded from the unrestricted general fund. In fact, it's a net, savings for the unrestricted general fund. In addition, we looked at the classified positions, and I did verify with staff, because when you're building a budget, you have several people putting in different pieces and parts, and I wanted to make sure that the information that I gave you was correct. And we did modify the classified positions for more than what is showing on here, and it is included in the budget. I just had it documented wrong in the memo. So there was a total of 4.2 FTE classified that was added, and they were clerical, campus monitor, and noontime assistants. And the total cost was $292,000. Again, the memo has incorrect information in it, but I wanted to make sure the board and the public knew that we did do a review of not only the teacher positions, but the classified positions. Lastly, along the staffing lines, if you remember back in June, we talked about adding some stipends for head teachers and for athletics. Well, when we were doing a review, we realized that some of the smaller secondary schools had not been included. And to ensure that there's equity, we're adding $50,000 to ensure that all schools are included. This slide you probably remember, we thought it was a good thing to just come back to since we were talking about staffing. This shows the enrollment trend for the district, and I'm focusing really more on last year and this year. So last year, the CBEDS enrollment was 40,660, and the projected enrollment for this year was 40,235, which was a projected decrease of 425. In actuality, right now, again, it's preliminary. It's not, yesterday was the CBEDS date. I actually don't have that number, but what I wanted to do was to give an update based upon where we were with staffing. So we were doing the staffing around September 11th, and on that date, the enrollment was 40,455. which was an increase of 220 students over our projected enrollment, or a decrease of 205 from last year, if you look at the glass half full or the glass half empty. We wanted to honor both sides on how you look at things. If this does come true, that the enrollment stays at this level, this will mean that there will be increased revenue next year, not this year, will be funded off of the prior year. It's too early to know exactly what this would come to, and at the first interim, the next formal reporting period, we will be reporting out where things land and how things are looking and what it would mean for the multi-year. At this time, we have not added any additional revenue to the multi-year, but wanted to give everyone an update on what could possibly be a good news story. Continuing on with some of the different proposed expenditures that are included in the proposed revised budget. The first one there is graduation costs for the Memorial Auditorium. This is where Sac City has all of their different graduation ceremonies, and that has recently been redone, the auditorium has, and their costs have gone up 55%. So what this is recognizing is that cost to rent the facilities for all of the different graduations and to relieve the high schools from having to do fundraising, which they've had to do in the past. So it's an additional cost of $46,500, but I believe the schools will be happy that they don't have to try to do fundraising for their graduations, and so it's including those monies there. In addition, in July, we were contacted by communication from SCOE on our Community Day students and the students they service for special education, that there was going to be an increased cost. And the cost that is recognized here is $370,000. One piece is because the Community Day had never been budgeted in the Sac City Unified, so the cost really isn't an increase of that amount, but it's recognized again in the budget so that we're putting the appropriate amount of monies there for the bill that should come at the end of the year. The next item there is restricted routine maintenance, and it's increasing $1 million. Why is that? If you'll recall that restricted routine maintenance needed to go from 2% of your expenditures of your general fund to 3% in 1920, and this budget does recognize all of the carryover and entitlements in addition to the expenditures that I'm talking here. So to maintain that 3%, we need to add an additional $1 million to the restricted routine maintenance budget. On the expenditure savings side, to make sure you realize that we looked at everything that we can. With the end of 18-19, when we saw how the utilities landed, we knew we had a lower base. We used the same expenditure increases that are planned for the 19-20 year, but because we had a lower base, it's a savings of $215,000 for the 19-20 year, and so the budget does recognize that. In addition, we looked at contracts that had not been used for the past couple of years, and so that is a savings of $486,000, and so we did remove those funds too. And lastly, the proposed revised budget includes a paralegal position, but it's a reprioritization of funds. And what we learned on this is that the PRAs that have been requested from the public have gone up, where was my notes? Over 300%. So in 17-18, there was 60 PRAs. Last year, there was 204. And this year to date, there has been 42. Moving on to one-time expenditures. These total approximately $2 million in the unrestricted general fund. We missed including in the adopted budget in June that the district had promised to have 2 years of training for the Waldorf, and so that's an additional $20,000 that we should have included in the June budget. In addition, in speaking with Matt, we needed to have money set aside for teachers to be able to do the evaluation of the science of book adoption. We were utilizing lottery dollars for the books, so you can't pay salaries out of lottery dollars, so that is why you're seeing the $200,000 here. We also needed to have some equipment replaced in our high schools, some defibrillators, and so that is $72,000. The next item, the student interim assessments, we talked about that in August. We're including that here because, again, it wasn't included in the June adopted budget, so that's why you're seeing some of the items here again that were presented to you in August. Next, the designations that you saw in the 1819 unaudited actuals, those different designations for donations, the computer replacement program, and all the such there. 1.65 million is now reallocated for those funds to be spent in the 1920 year. And lastly, on the restricted side, using up some of those one-time special ed dollars that the state is providing, the district is recommending 1.77 million be set aside for these following items: the professional learning that we discussed back in August, for the IEP team to be able to help with the backlog of the IEPs for our preschool students, and release time for our preschool teachers to help design the desired results development profile. Say that 3 times, everyone. And with that, I'm going to turn that back over to Rose.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, we're almost towards the end here. These are the multi-year projection assumptions that we utilize to prepare or project the budgets for the 2 out years. And just to clarify where we get our assumptions from, like all school districts, we get them from the state adopted budget. And then as a quick reference, School Services of California also has a 1-page dartboard that most districts use. So for the revenues, we used a COLA for 2021 of 3%, which equates to 8.4 million increase in revenue. And for 21-22, the COLA is projected at 2.8% for $8.75 million in revenue. And of course, these are subject to change until the state actually adopts its budget. So that's why you see updates during the interim reporting periods. And now expenditure changes over the next 2 years include the following. And just to, again, clarify that the details for how much per year can be found in the executive summary. Just for summary purposes, we lumped them all into one line item, but we have that information available in case needed up here. So an increase in contribution for STRS and PERS per the statute of 3.4 million, a 4% increase for health benefits of 3.6 million, an increase to the charter school contribution of 700,000. Utilities, we're expecting to see an increase there of 1.1 million. And for special ed, an increase of 14.6 million with 7.3 per year. And then finally, a decrease in teaching positions as we align our staffing to our declining enrollment. And right now, we're projecting about 1.5 million over the 2 years. And tiny numbers on this huge slide here. Okay, so what this is, it's the same information that was presented to you in an earlier slide on slide 6. This just includes more detail. And of course, in your executive summary, you have this in a regular font so you can read it easier. But basically what this is doing, it's just providing more detail to show, to highlight the one-time revenues from the one-time expenses, just so that we clarify that. But again, the lines that you really do want to pay attention to aside from that is your change in your unrestricted general fund balance, which is your bottom line. As you can see, we are still projecting, as we said, that we're going to be negative in that final year. We're still showing a negative 1.35% in the reserve. And in terms of dollars, the unrestricted general fund balance will end at a negative 7.82, which is 3 lines up to the very right from the bottom. So this is the same information. Now, this next slide shows imposing the reductions that we have to make and where that gets us in the budget, and does it get us out of the situation? And yes, it does. And I'm going to take you to those dollar amounts. They're located 3 lines from the bottom. It's titled Required Ongoing Reductions. Move over to the right. Under the year 2021, you're going to see 16 million. And then immediately over to the right, you'll see another reduction of 11. These are ongoing reductions. And so the impact on your reserves is your bottom line. Over to the right, you're going to see it's going to increase it to 6.19%. So that seems, higher than, some maybe 2%, 3%. Our required reserve is 2%, but just achieving that is not going to get us out of the deficit. We will still have a deficit at 2%. So this does eliminate the deficit. And so this is what, this is one scenario that we presented, which has to, of course, take place by the time we get to 21-22 to get the district out of the situation. Okay, so lots of information. So we're at the summary now. So the summary is that the district has implemented, you've seen the slide, various reductions. to the tune of, $60 million. And so our options at this point are pretty limited. The bulk of our expenses are tied in personnel costs. They account for a little over 91%, which you all know already. And so we need a solution, a $27 million ongoing solution to avoid a crisis. And the more time that goes by, the greater the problem gets. So this is where we're at. Although we have some improvements, we still have some work to do. And this pretty much concludes our presentation, and we're available for questions, or if you'd like to go into the public hearing at this point.
Any public comment?
Yes, we have 3 public comments. Please come up as you're called. First one is Angel Garcia, then Cecile Nunley, followed by Maria Rodriguez.
Thank you. And then I'd like to recognize that Superintendent Dave Gordon is in the house. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to try to do this in 2 minutes. I'm Angel Garcia, representing the Coalition for Students with Disabilities. There's been a lot of talk recently about the class action special education lawsuit that was filed on behalf of the Black Parallel School Board. Since the district tends to spend more than the community hopes for, and we're talking budget, I'd like to talk about the potential impact of this lawsuit. This lawsuit calls for systemic changes for students with disabilities, and we wholeheartedly agree that the special ed system needs overhaul. But even with the intense legal pressure that this lawsuit is bringing, there must be buy-in across the district for any changes to work. This means the district must effectively invest in systemic changes, and that there needs to be buy-in for all of the labor partners. When special education was audited, the Council of the Great City School Auditors were perplexed by the power that the SCTA had in delaying the development of the multi-tiered system of supports. They said that they had never seen in a large urban district a teachers union delay the implementation of MTSS. In our years as parents and CAC members advocating in Sac City Unified, we have watched as SCTA has used their power to block other critical initiatives from moving forward. They have insisted through the years that these student learning initiatives are bargaining issues. For example, the right for students to be included was treated as a bargaining issue for many years. Appendix D, entitled Special Education Student Inclusion, was a part of the teacher's contract for over 20 years, dating back to 1993, despite containing illegal and discriminatory language violating federal and state laws. Finally, in 2017, the appendix was removed after CAC parents advocated for years, and thanks to our school board and district and staff for keeping this issue at the forefront. Despite this, the district is healing from decades of bias towards special education students. I'm running out of time, but inclusive practices, this also happened. So did PBIS, restorative practices. And we also know about an MOU that prevents assessments. In conclusion, our kids should not be treated as bargaining chips. These are not HR issues. They are student issues. This is vital because these issues make USD a breeding ground for bullying, segregation, and disciplinary problems. Our students deserve better than this. They deserve a safe and welcoming learning environment. Our coalition, and as a former CAC member, we've been advocating for years about these issues. Thank you.
She did such a wonderful job. What I just wanted to point out, and hopefully the screen will show up, I thought the folks here did a wonderful job, and I really did appreciate the letter from Superintendent Gordon to the district. I thought it was well balanced, as well as really highlighted the needs of the district. One of the things, if it were to show on here, and it's page 4 of 172, one of the things that it talks about as far as experts, and really as a district, we have to rely on our experts, because people come in and they try and take a little piece and then say, extrapolate it to the entire budget piece, and it doesn't quite work that way. So one of the things, if it shows, the very last thing, it says, has there been personnel changes in the superintendent or chief business officer? Right now, for this district, the answer is yes. And that's because of the chief business officer position. One of the things that continuously has to be advocated is that the board has to support the superintendent. Because when you start having that consistency, you start getting stable on your budget. And that's why it's been so critical. And that's why it's so important that the board stick together and support the superintendent as well as the CBO. It's critical because that helps students as well as it helps the district. And I hope the board continues to support those two individuals. Thank you so much.
Good evening, board. My name is Maria Rodriguez, and I'm really not here to tell you anything that I'm sure you don't already know. But as a matter of public document, I know these meetings get recorded and people look back on them. I was struck by the utility savings, and it makes me aware that today's climate, we are concerned about our environment. And I think that it's a genius idea to install solar to bring down our utility costs. I don't know why we can't use capital dollars. There may be some reason, but I work at an organization that recently did that, and it's saving us operating costs. The other thing is consumables on books. In this day and age, it's a waste of paper. I would expect that our curriculum people would not be using consumables, which I don't know, but I would think would be more expensive and also a drain on resources. So that's my 2 points, but since I still have a minute, I do want to commend this administration and the people in the finance department a lot. I have been in this district a long time, and frankly, I've seen administrations use things on the chopping block to get people riled up. I'm not making this up because I had someone in the administration tell me that they were doing that with after-school sports. I think that this administration is working honestly, and I think the board is working diligently, and I am really thankful for the financial people. And then the last thing that, again, I think you all know, and I don't need to tell you, is school sites have dollars that go unused every year. There's really no reason for that in this climate. So if we can have a staff person who could go to every school and work with the administration to make sure they use every single dollar that they have, that would go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more comment from Kenya Martinez.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the CAC. We've been meeting periodically with Chief Academic Officer Christine Vanda and Special Education Director Becky Bryant in regards to the $1.2 million in professional development that's being allocated to the district. We have questions about what this $1.2 million is going to, how it's going to be used, and we just wanted to make sure that you, the board members that you guys were aware of that. We have deep questions and concerns. I won't speak on behalf of all of the CAC members because we're not here and we didn't actually draft a actual public comment, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it? Okay. So we'll begin with comments from my colleagues, and we're moving into public hearing.
I think we heard all of the comments during public hearing. Okay. So it may be time to close the public hearing, having heard all the comments, correct?
All right.
So we will close the public hearing and entertain a motion to move to action.
You can have board discussion before your action. That's up to the board.
Okay.
But the hearing is closed as far as the public portion.
Okay. We have board member comments. Board member Morowski.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to thank and recognize our new CBO, Ms. Rose Ramos, for an excellent overview, and just really glad to have you on board, and I'm glad to hear it from Ms. Canfield as well. So I have a few questions. I didn't have the benefit of having the slides available until earlier today, so my questions were really based off of the budget document. So I have some questions that I just made relevant to the slide, so I guess I'll go through those first, and then a couple of them I think I'll refer back to the pages on the budget document, if that's okay. So on the page 5 of the slides, on the SCOE suggested next steps, and I don't mind if we can kind of do as rapid fire as you want. I wanted to know, can you talk about what the district is doing on these items? We kind of went over them, but this looks like a bit of a roadmap and recommendation. So if you could talk to what the district is doing, and if it needs to have a longer or greater in-depth discussion, maybe we can discuss at an upcoming fiscal committee meeting.
I can briefly discuss a couple of them, just really quick, and some of them that may be longer. Certainly, we can have a different discussion. On number one, the district is in the situation of trying to negotiate that. As far as number two is concerned, the district does have a couple of key vacancy positions out there. Number one is our budget director, which is a very important position, and that position has closed, so we're in the process of screening those applications and hoping to hire quickly. And then, of course, looking for opportunities to definitely implement some training for our staff so that they can stay current. And just having arrived here a few weeks ago, I have started to dive into reviewing the one-stop staffing process and just looking at the way the district does that. And so reviewing that to see where we can streamline and still make sure that we are compliant, because that's very important, and that we have all of the correct departments at the table when we're having these discussions as far as any position changes are concerned, whether it's adding, deleting, or changing. So I am taking into consideration in that area information that I have from my former districts, as well as Ms. Canfield. She brings some excellent resources as well. So we are looking at various districts to streamline that process. And then we are evaluating our staffing ratios and class sizes. As we discussed, we went through the whole leveling process. We do know that there is some room for improvement. And we are working with Decision Insight. I'm very familiar with that firm. I worked with them at my former district, and they are very good at providing information the district needs as far as enrollment projections. However, they will rely on us to make sure that we provide them with good, accurate, basic information. So what we should be doing in that case is just making sure we're comparing for reasonableness, looking at what our past trend has been like, what they're projecting, and adding to that our expected decline, and just making sure that it looks reasonable. We can't just rely on one system. There's various methods that you can use for coming up with your staffing ratios and your class sizes, and then working, of course, with all of our staff to make sure that we are considering all the various programs, because we do have a lot of programs in this district. So, and some of them are staffed differently. So just really evaluating that. And of course, it's a given. We have to adhere to the budget calendar. That's not an optional thing. So in the next few months, we will be bringing before you a budget calendar and probably discussing it more in detail before it gets here to that point. And then continuing to improve our disclosure of our budget assumptions and documentation. That's really important also for the business staff, because so that everyone knows and the public knows what went into building the budget. What were the percentages that we used? What were we considering when we were considering all factors? So that's very brief.
Okay,
but,
thank you. That's a great overview, and I look forward to maybe in the committee we can follow up on as you go along, just making sure that we're tracking that these things are being implemented and how the progress is going. In particular, one of the principles we discussed at the last committee was critically reevaluating spending patterns and the evaluating staffing ratios and class sizes, as that's kind of the basic framework for how the school site budgets get built. Would like to kind of go through that exercise and be kind of make sure we're abreast of the thought that's going into that. On page 10, enrollment, and we had, let's see, it was 22 positions, 22 FTE due to enrollment. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding. So we added 22 FTE. We already had around 90 above the baseline, right, or 89 here. So we added 22 FTE to that, but I guess maybe I'm just not following the numbers. And then the 30 additional teachers, I think that's just related to the funding source that they're funded from? We kind of offloaded from the unrestricted general fund to federal funds?
So probably I should have had dashes on these or whatever. I think that they were like somewhat related, but I think it might be confusing. So additional 22.2 FTE were added regardless of funding source. Some of them were baseline and some of them were extra. What I was trying to show was that in addition to that, we had a change of existing staff from 89, being above baseline, supported by supplemental concentration or Title I dollars, and now it's 127. So even though there was an increased enrollment at some individual school sites, they really didn't have that enrollment to, sustain the teachers that were there, but decisions were made to maintain the staff that was there because of particular reasons, either how the kids happened to fall, or it was a special program, and they needed an additional teacher. And so those are independent of each other, so there was 22.2 more FTE, period. And then from there, what I was trying to say, of your existing staff, there was change in funding, and we have 38 more positions that are above staffing parameters. And of those, 30 of them are in Title I.
Okay, so 38 above due to various reasons.
Various
of
reasons.
Program,
Right,
special
right.
programs and so forth. And then the 22.2 was due to enrollment, so that would be considered the
22.2 is
baseline.
not just enrollment,
Okay.
but the majority of that would be. If you want me to break it down, I'd have to go and look at it closer.
Okay, so 22.2 was mostly due to enrollment.
Mostly.
Okay, I'm trying to understand the two different, it sounds like it's two different buckets, enrollment and then the kind of special other reasons due to program structure. But is there something else I'm missing?
So no, what I'm trying to say is that you have 22.2 more teachers than what we did the adopted budget, period. Some of it was because of enrollment, some of it
Oh, I
was
see.
for specific program needs. But you have 22.2 more teachers that we're recommending than the adopted budget.
Okay, very good. Okay, sorry, I guess that took too long. My computer fell asleep. On page 15, can we talk about the, let's see, 15, the special education increases, 7.3 million each year. Can you briefly describe what is baked into that? Was that just based on trends, or was there kind of an analysis done of what the different growth?
So that is the same number that from the adopted budget. We did not update that, so that's the same as the June. And what we had done is we had looked at the historical increases in special education, and we maintained that level and with a little bit extra to make sure that we were okay in the future years. So it's a conservative estimate.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I look forward to kind of being able to understand more about kind of what are driving those increases in the future. So.
Well, a lot of non-public school contract increases,
Oh, okay.
along with some personnel costs, but that's mainly the non-public schools.
Non-public schools. Okay, yeah, it's definitely something we need to look at. Okay. And this is kind of going back to special ed again, on page 5 of the budget document. And I think this is in the executive summary, that the contributions go from 83 million to 100 million. And I just wanted to, and that would be the third line down in the chart, contributions, the second line of numbers, 83.28 going to 100 million. So I just wanted, it's not on the slides. Sorry, guys. Or maybe it is somewhere.
No, so I need to say, I don't know if it's kind of cute. I got your email from, early this morning or whatever, and I looked at it. And so I had read the first part, and I didn't have my thumb go up. And so then I read the rest of it when I got into work. So I do have I left it back there, so I'm looking at it. So for special education, the reason for the differences is essentially you first have the increased program, costs, like what we were talking about on like the 7.3, but we actually had like 6 million because we had some additional income from special education. But what happens here, so we have a 12 million more that is related to special education. Of that, 6 million is the program costs, and then we have an additional 3 million for the teachers' salary restructure, which is 2.7 of the regular salaries, and then 0.44 of the substitute and stipends. And then in addition, what we had done, if you recall, at the June budget, we had not been charging the special ed program for indirect, which is about $3 million. And so to show the true cost of the program, we had included that in also.
Okay, so the 3 million is the, just kind of reflecting that in the special ed budget?
Yes.
As indirect where it wasn't before?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, that's just a large jump in 1 year, so I just want to make sure we understand what.
And the other part was the restricted team maintenance went up 5 million.
Is that?
5 million.
That's 5 million?
Yeah, 4 million from the June, and then an additional one here that we presented tonight, a total of 5 million.
So can I ask about that, the routine restricted maintenance? Was there something that was left out that was an oversight that brought it up by $1 million? Or
So at the adopted budget time, we did not include carryover in the entitlements, money. So
I see.
so
Okay.
that is the amount.
Because that wasn't known until
yes,
then. Okay.
Right.
It was an oversight. It just
No.
wasn't known.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. And page 7 in the, this is kind of a big thing that I think we all need to understand. And you mentioned that the reason for the 16 million recommended reductions in 2021 and then the 11 million the following year was due to the recommendation to eliminate the deficit. Am I understanding that? Because I'm looking at the bottom line reserve levels are much higher than the recommended, or the minimum 2% and the recommended 4%. So I just wanted to make sure that we understand why.
Yeah, that's correct. And now that's what I said during the presentation, is that in order to eliminate the deficit, you would need to have this much amount of a reduction in order to make that happen. We were putting in some other numbers to see how far we could go before we would not get at a deficit, and I believe even at a 4%, we were still generating. A 2% definitely, we were still at a deficit.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me say, I thought I wrote down my numbers. But yeah, we were trying to get to that point where there was like, this was your absolutely bare minimum to do both. Get your 2% required reserve and eliminate the deficit. And if you go up, I mean, you're barely in that third year with this 27 million, you're just at what, like $20,000. So it's not, a whole lot more above. You could certainly push out the 27 to the third year, and then your reserve changes down to, I think it was like 399 or something in that category, 3.47. And so then it looks a little more balanced.
But
that's
a
another
lot,
option.
yeah.
But I mean, you're just delaying, just that reduction. You're pushing it all out in 1 year, and that would have to happen in order to achieve this.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we're all on the same page about what that means. It's that we're not going to run out of cash if we don't make absolutely all of those cuts, but to eliminate the deficit and to be on a trajectory that going forward, our revenues are balanced with our expenditures. That's what this does.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I know that others have a lot of questions probably too, so I'm just going to maybe pick a couple more. And
Probably have similar questions.
yeah, I did want to talk about the ongoing expenses and the salary restructure, the cost for substitutes, stipends, and per session rates. I'm not sure if I know what per session rates are, so maybe you could explain that. But I also want to hear more about kind of when we figured that was an additional cost, because that's 1.3 million. That seems like a pretty big jump. And so was that part of what was included as approved by the arbitrator, or was that something that was negotiated on later based on that? Because I know there were lots of different salary charts and so forth. So was that part of that, was that in the arbitration? Or was that?
Let me turn that over to Jackie. I wasn't part of that discussion. I don't want to misspeak on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I tried to cover it, but I must not have done a very good job. So the salary schedules over the summer were worked on. There's 16 different salary schedules, and so a lot of work went into that. After that work was completed, and based upon the current CBA that we have with the teachers union, we need to honor what would happen with the substitutes and the stipends. And it's related to certain cells and certain formulas in Article 12. And so based upon that information, we looked at what the results are, and it was a 9.2%, increase in the substitutes and the stipends. And so when we saw that, we knew that we needed to include that into the revised adopted budget for everyone to have. And that's an increased cost over the original teacher salary restructure.
Okay. And so that wasn't included in or kind of thought through.
It wasn't
at the time.
specifically talked about in the arbitration decision. It's just an after effect because of the current collective bargaining agreement language.
Okay, so it was implicitly tied to one of those columns and.
Correct.
Okay, got it. On the classified positions, I think it's on that same page, and you mentioned in the slides that there were 4 point something maybe classified positions that were added back. I just wanted to clarify on that, because I know they're all due to a formula. So was that a result of looking at the increase in enrollment and just running it through that formula that everyone kind of got what they were entitled to?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so there wasn't like a decision point on that was.
No.
Okay. Very good. On the teaching positions, do you have an estimate of the actual savings associated with the layoffs? I know actually the 7.8 I think was the overall savings, but then we added back for classified positions. We added back 22 FTE of teachers. So I don't know. Do you have like an overall kind of net?
So if you do look at the standards and criteria, you still do see that we have like 72 less teaching positions. So it kind of actually works out to around that same amount. So even though there's a difference in the FTEs and all of that, there is less teaching positions, 72 less than last year.
Oh, okay, but it's not. But the entire savings estimate associated with that was like 7.8 million with the layoffs, kind of that like line item, right?
Right. So
like
I'm going to
net
use like
of-
100,000 for a teacher, which is not necessarily the exact right number, but it's easy to multiply. So that's 7.2 if you have
Okay.
72 FTE, and that's all funding sources in the general fund.
Okay, so that maybe that's reduced by a couple million or so.
I'm not sure why you're reducing it.
So we projected to save 7.8 million
Okay.
associated with layoffs.
Oh, all right,
But then we
yes.
added some back. So I'm just wondering like what the net, if we have a number that's
So what
like
I'm
the
saying
net.
is right now, the standards and criteria, you have 72 less positions than last year.
Okay, so just take, you're talking about just take the 7.2 and net,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay. Okay, it's not making sense in my head that, because it's 7 point.
I
Okay,
understand.
I got it.
I
All right,
understand.
I'll follow up on that one. Okay, and then on the stipends, there was some that were not counted, and I think I noticed that a couple of times. There were pieces in going through that certain schools were excluded, and I know that was an issue with the enrollment projections that we talked about earlier in the year, that certain schools were excluded. So I just wanted to ask, is there kind of a system we're putting in place to make sure that, when we get all of those assumptions laid out, can we have a system that makes sure that whenever we go through one of those calculations, that all of the schools or all of the whatever, we're counting our.
I hear you and I agree, yes.
Okay, I guess that's a request. Okay. I guess the one other big piece is there was a I'm sorry, I'm not finding it where it was, but you said a big chunk was being captured in the supply line, in the books and supplies line. Can you speak to that? I'm not really sure I understood what was going on there.
So the revised adopted budget, since we've closed the books, and the first interim is going to be as of October 31st, staff worked hard to recognize all of the carryover and entitlements from the 18-19 closing of the books and brought them into the revised adopted budget. When that is done, a normal practice for lots of school districts is to take all of the funds and put them in the supply line for expedia's sake.
Okay.
It will then be transferred based upon individual budget managers' needs to the appropriate budget line.
And do you know how much, so how much should we consider is kind of that lump sum that's outside of what we actually think will be budgeted for books and supplies versus, it sounds like we have like the actual budget and then we have another bucket on top of that that's kind of, we don't really know.
So this is going to be on the restricted side, so it's not necessarily inflating necessarily the unrestricted, except there might be a few donations or lost books in there, but not anything large in magnitude. We did talk with our budget supervisor and a financial analyst, and they did say a lot of it does stay in supplies, but there will be some movement. I don't have a percentage for you, though.
Okay. I guess maybe I'll follow up with you on that. I guess it's a little odd to me that we don't know what we're budgeting for. Does that, I mean?
So not some of it is really just for supplies.
Yeah.
I mean, well, for example, I can tell you that 3.5 million in Title I went to salaries and benefits. It did not go to supplies and carryover, and so I know that with SIG, there probably will be other ones that will move up into, personnel lines. But you're asking me for a percentage, and I really can't give a number right like that for you right now, so.
Okay, no, I don't need a percentage, just
I can just
want to understand kind of the conceptual, like what's going on there.
I can just add to that a little bit, because a bulk of that, of course, it's one-time dollars, right, what the sites had left over from the prior year.
Yeah.
So staff does, like Jackie explained, put it into the supply line item because it's a holding place. But typically, you're going to see what I've seen. I can't speak for Sac City. I don't know their trend yet. About 80% of those carryover dollars do stay there because the sites do use it for one time. They occasionally will move it to other items, like for field trips or for other one-time expenses, or maybe it may move to salaries, but rarely does it because salary can be ongoing unless they have a limited position, like, I don't know, they need some extra noon duty support or something. I'm just basing it on prior experience. But typically it will stay there just to, maybe they want to buy additional computers or something, and that's a perfect good use of those one-time dollars.
Okay, so they do get allocated down to schools, the money in that, the dollars, those are carryover per school?
Those are carryover per school, and there is the formula. I haven't, really dived into the formula here for this district, but typically from other districts, there's formulas that go with that carryover, what they're entitled to. Some districts hold back some of the unrestricted carryover, and some do not. So, but for the most part, the restricted does go back out. There's some rules with Title I about it has to come back into a pool and go back out, but yeah, that gets a little more technical.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Okay, thank you. I will hand the mic back.
Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. I just have one question and a couple recommendations. One of my questions, very simple questions. I don't know if you guys can answer that or if the staff may need to answer it, but some of the items that you listed on here, for example, the AED machines. I've talked on this dais many times about how there were AED machines in a locked closet somewhere. We don't know where they're at. I want to know, is this amount for the maintenance on the current AED machines? Are we purchasing all new AED machines?
We are purchasing.
Everybody's pointing at somebody. I don't know who they're pointing at.
We're purchasing all new, but I can't speak to the
Okay, so
location.
if we're purchasing all new, can you tell me where the current AED machines are at?
It
My
looks like
understanding is
Victoria
that they were
Flores
being
is
put
coming to
into-
answer this question, Board
Because
Member
my understanding is
Pritchett.
that they were being put into the high schools.
Correct. So they rolled out to our large comprehensive high schools. We refurbished all the AED machines that we purchased and upgraded the software. However, because the law changed, we actually have to place more AEDs than we did in the past.
Okay,
So
that's
all those
exactly what I wanted
cabinets,
to know.
everything, facilities have been awesome in helping us use everything we already had.
So this upgrade is in response to compliance with law change.
Correct. And using the equipment we already had. Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is more of a facilities question. So on here, you had talked about the Memorial Auditorium and the upgrades to it that would cost the district 55% more in graduation fees. And once upon a time, we used to have graduation ceremonies on football fields. We have all these beautiful football fields where we refurbished and put in AstroTurf. We stopped having graduation ceremonies because of insurance purposes. So my question is, are we past the point, maybe Cathy can answer this, are we past the point in our insurance where we can start placing chairs and hosting events now on our football fields?
Some, but maybe not all, would be past the warranty period. But the problem with doing that is now as holes are made by chairs placed on the fields, we would now have to fix those holes. So that presents a bit of a challenge, but.
Well, boards could be put down, so that way the chairs aren't being put on directly on the AstroTurf, correct? So maybe that's something that we could look into as well, and we can host. Oh, don't give me the hot thing. This is saving money. Come on. And so if we can look into that, that would be fabulous. And then my last request is in regard to the FTAP committee. I know that you were asking Member Morawski about several things coming back to the FTAP committee. I would really like to see a summary being sent out to all board members of what's happening in that meeting, that we're all on the same page.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay.
And we do post all of the, if there's presentations and things on there, but it would be good to, after that is done, have staff send out just to make sure we're all aware when things are updated. I know you probably don't check the FTAC committee website
Sometimes,
periodically,
but it would be nice to have a summary being sent
I don't
out.
expect anyone to do that every day.
Great, thank you. That's all my recommendations.
Thank you, Board Member Pritchett. Board Member Garcia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Morawski. You had some excellent questions, and that lightens up my load. So I wanted to go back to the enrollment projections. So we were projecting that we would have a declining enrollment of 405, 25, something like that. Luckily, it was not as bad. But I do want to understand sort of what happened in the original projection. Why was it so high? Was it something that we work with Decision Insight on, and information that we share? So I just want to understand that process a little bit more, just because it was off by, half.
So this is referring to the projection versus what we're looking at as far as September 11th?
Right.
The difference?
Right.
This is pretty typical for most school districts. We're at the early stages right now of school, so we typically see higher enrollment at this period, and it would be great if this sustained throughout the year, but what you do see is right around December is you see a decline, especially in our secondaries, and so that's why we don't really want to say that this is the number that we're going to use. We're hoping that it will stay for the year like Jackie described, but we don't get to count this until actually P2, which is next April. That's when we actually get to see where our enrollment does land and where our actual ADA does land, which will then provide the basis for our funding for the next year, should that be the higher, So yeah, but we were just putting the number out there. Where are we at this point? And we will continue to monitor. And I believe here in this district, we do provide monthly enrollment reports, so we should be able to see that if that trend is continuing or not. So it's not that the projection is necessarily off yet because we don't know. We're just reporting out where we're at as of this time.
Can I add to that since it's the same question?
Sure.
I think if you don't mind, Board Member Vang, we're going to let Board Member Garcia finish, and then we'll come back to you. You're next.
So, so I think I'm still not, I understand that these numbers are still moving. I just don't understand though, and maybe it's common with districts to sort of project at the end of the last academic year that maybe we would be down by 425 students, right? We would have that decline in enrollment starting July 1st, but then we were not really down by 425 students. So I mean, that we were up by 220, right? Then more than we expected. So I just need to understand sort of how that happens. Is it within a normal range of change among school districts? And I just sort of, I would like to understand sort of moving forward, how do you make that a little bit more accurate? And I don't know if that's by virtue of decision inside, by virtue of information that we provide or look at. Just how do you tighten that up? Because our schools felt a scramble. I mean, I got many phone calls from parents that there were a lot of kids enrolled at certain schools, and the kids were CONCAP. They were being sent to other school sites, and parents that have two kids, one had a spot at one school and not a spot at the, and so the second child had to go to a completely different school. So I just kind of want to understand that in terms of planning process. And I don't know if that was, so if you can, if you need to get back to me on that, that's fine. It's just something that I just quite can't figure out.
Yeah, I can just tell you, the theory, how we come across, how we calculate enrollment projections. And I haven't really taken a deep dive into, the whole history for Sac City's enrollment projections. But typically what you do is you have to look at a trend. You look at your historical analysis to see if there's a pattern of decline over time. And you consider various factors. What's going on in your community? Is there, an exodus of students because your community is unaffordable anymore? I mean, I can say from the Bay Area, that's what we were experiencing. Or are you getting new development that may draw additional students? So there's a variety of factors that go into whatever increase or decrease you use to project your next year's enrollment. And so you'll see that finally start to level off. And I know it's unfortunate at the beginning of the school year, especially if you're a district that is declining in enrollment, you are going to have that scramble. We all experience that. It's really frustrating. I've seen that, and it's been unfortunate that I've worked in the last few districts that have all declined. And so we are all projecting for that decline because we don't want to get stuck also mid-year with excess staffing that the district just can't afford. So there's that uncomfortable period if you have to wait and see where everything levels off. And if your enrollment projections are pretty good, they're pretty solid, you'll see that they all balance out when you get to right around about the second month of the school year. But I'll take a closer look, and we can continue this discussion and see what it is that we are providing to Decision Insight to make sure that they have what they need to really help us with our enrollment projections. I haven't taken a look at that exactly.
And I have other questions, but if you want to ask your question, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm just going to add, and then we can go back to you, Member Garcia. I have a quick question.
Oh, I wanted to just add a little bit too. So we're really talking about less than 1%. So I wanted to make sure that, we all would want to be right on, but that is pretty darn close. So I wanted to make sure that everyone had that perspective. I mean, everyone wants to be hit right on, but it really, overall as a district, they did a pretty good job. And I have not been able to go and look to the level of concluding, was there really some gross differences? And what is an acceptable level? Obviously we all don't like to have any change, but the one piece that you were adding on the CONCAP, that may not even be related to the enrollment projections. That's just how the kids happened to fall and how the staffing had been done. And, did they do a combo class or not, so, I think that as we move and work with Decision Insight and we work for spring staffing for the following year, I think we're going to have a better idea of how much room we actually have. I mean, you're going to decide what the classroom configuration is, and everyone will know how much room is at the school for that, and then they can make a decision if they want to add another teacher position long beforehand, looking at it over the summer and just tightening it up a little bit better. Hope that helps a little.
Yes, it does. And I think the 1% is, I was trying to gauge sort of.
Yeah, it was less than 0.5%.
Like what does that mean, right, relative to other districts? I mean, and I realize you're never going to project exactly the amount of kids. I mean, there's things change, but that helps. And did you want to?
Just the projection. Ms. Ramos, you mentioned really quick about the.
Hold on one second. So Board Member Garcia, you're done with your questions, and we're now going to Board Member Vang?
No, I'm not done with my questions, but
so-
she just had a quick follow-up on my earlier question.
So what we were doing is we were finishing your questions, and then we were going to go to Board Member Vang for her questions. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure we were in order.
Okay, then I guess we'll keep going. So on slide 5, the SCOE suggested next step, the document one-stop staffing process and streamlining hiring to ensure budget is accurate. So is there I guess, an analysis of how well this process is working relative to having that maybe like not a constant, but a frequent communication with the school sites to have that two-way communication in terms of what the school sites need, what they need, see that they have maybe an enrollment in staffing needs. Relative to just the one-stop staffing process, I don't know how many opportunities school sites really have to provide that input. And I don't know if it's, I think it's a relatively new process that we've implemented, or somehow I think it's changed a bit, but I would just, advocate that we need to make sure that we allow the school sites to have more opportunities to provide input, so that you have as current information as you possibly can as possible. And I did want to follow up on the last bullet point, to continue to improve the budget assumption documentation. What exactly does that mean?
Those are the factors that drive your budget. For example, what are we using to determine our decline? Is it 1%, 0.5%? That's one assumption. What are we using for COLA? What are we using for the cost increase for our utilities or fixed costs? What are we using for step and column? Typically, for most districts, it's 1.5%. What are we using to estimate the cost of increased health benefits? So those are some of the assumptions. And then what's specific to this district? We are experiencing maybe more of a decline in our primary grades versus, secondary. So we start to take a deeper dive. And so we would disclose all that information. It's called the list of assumptions in our budget document, so that the public and what went into building this budget. Any other
So is it
factors?
more of an update, continue to update budget assumption documentation, or improve to me implies that there's some room for improvement throughout the process? So I'm trying to figure out like which one is it? And if you found an area that can be improved in terms of documenting the assumptions moving forward.
Yeah. I wasn't here last year, sorry to say that, but I'm just.
So am I just misinterpreting the word?
Yeah.
If I am, that's fine. I just.
But I can tell you, we update the assumptions. With every reporting period, there's changes that occur at the state level. We hear information from the state that, maybe COLA isn't going to be 3% after all. So you'll see that updated, and then we'll talk about it in the presentation. We thought we were going to get 3%. We're not. It's going to be 2.5%. So that's what the updating, maybe it refers to that. And yes, of course, we absolutely will need to do that.
Okay. And then just a couple of other questions. On the contract savings, I think that's slide 13. So you had mentioned that the contract savings of almost $500,000 was based on contracts that really hadn't been used. What kind of contracts do we have that we don't really use?
It was contracts or monies that could have been used for contracts. The UC Merced, there was some money set aside for Safe Haven and DACA, and they had not been used. And so we actually then just removed those.
Oh, got it. Okay. And then the legal services position, the paralegal, is that a permanent position, ongoing position? Is that a temporary? I know there's been a spike in PRAs, and that's sort of what's driving the need to have a paralegal, but I'm just wondering.
At this time, they would be hiring a permanent person.
A permanent person. And then my last question, I know you'll be glad to hear. What are the next steps in terms of once we adopt this, I guess, revised budget? What's next in terms of, addressing the SCOE letter? I mean, we've revised the budget, but we still have a structural deficit. So I think I'm just missing, how are we fixing what they say the problem is, because we're still sending them a budget, a revised budget that has the same problem. And I just need to understand that.
Well, this is, a technicality. We had to go through this because of the negative budget. So as we've said that we're going to submit it, it is negative, so it will be disapproved again. So we're going to go through the same process. And
So we're just in a technical sort of back and forth at this point?
Well, I mean, it's up
Yes.
to until we arrive at a solution.
Ms. Ramos, if it would be possible, I'd like to acknowledge Superintendent Gordon. And Superintendent Gordon, would you be willing to speak to this item? Thank you.
Good evening, President Ryan, board members.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you for your patience.
Of course. If you remember what happened last year, the same process will ensue again after you approve the revised budget. We will go back to the state and put you in a negative status again, and we will continue with the oversight as we did this year, because, as was said, the circumstances really haven't changed. So to avoid you ending up in the same place you were at the end of last year, next year we will continue the oversight and the fiscal advisor after going through the process that we did with the state, as you recall from last year.
I came a little later after this process, but that's why I needed to understand sort of what is the path forward when nothing really has changed.
There is the process with the state where there are two paths that can be taken. There's a budget committee that the state would create, the State Department of Education would create, or if you are willing to waive that process, we can expedite that with the state, and we would just continue the oversight as we have done last year, and that's exactly what happened last year.
Okay, so at some point, the board has to make that decision, or is it the administration that makes that decision?
No, the board. This is a request that would come to the board as it did last year, for a waiver of the process of going to the state and having to convene a committee and take a long period of time and expense, rather than just putting you into the negative status and continuing the oversight as we have been doing it.
Okay. So that's the next step after you receive this budget, which will be rejected again.
That's correct.
Okay.
And again, the reason, and I want to really underscore this, the reason is not because you haven't done well or made progress. You've made a lot of progress, as I tried to make clear in the letter. You've made a lot of progress. It's just that the history of this district is one of constant deficit spending. And unless that trend is turned around, this will potentially go on and on and on and on. So you're on the path toward turning that trend around, but you're not done. And there's quite a bit left to be done to turn that corner and put the budget into projecting into a healthy position into the future. And it's sort of like changing bad habits. You got to get to the point where you change the habits and move forward. So that's kind of where you are.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing in future updates more proposals that we can continue to find savings pending our labor partners meeting with the superintendent and district staff to start that other process that we need in order to yield higher savings. But we have to continue to find savings until then.
The other thing I just wanted to say, since I'm here, is I really want to commend you and your staff on the new hires of your chief academic officer and your new CBO. I would hope all of the constituents involved with the districts would reach out to these individuals, meet them, and get to know them, because I think they have real potential to move you forward in a positive direction. So,
Superintendent Gordon, just in the event that this was also part of Member Garcia's questions, because she came in December, can you also describe what to expect procedurally in terms of a first interim and then moving into the spring, as long as we aren't able to achieve the kind of savings that would close our structural deficit?
Well, again, that depends. It's probably not appropriate to speculate on what hasn't happened. But again, you all recall the process that there's a first interim, and we give a progress report, and then there's a second interim, and there's another progress report, and we try to give you feedback along the way. But at those checkpoints, you'll get the letter and you'll get the assessment in writing of where you are. But again, I think your staff pointed out, time is your enemy in this process. This really needs to move if you're going to avoid ending up at the end of this fiscal year at the same place you were at the end of the last fiscal year.
Thank you, Superintendent Gordon. Thank you, Board Member Garcia. Board Member Vang, thank you for your patience.
I'll keep this fairly short because Member Moralski and Member Garcia asked a lot of my questions. Ms. Ramos, just really quick back on the enrollment projections. You mentioned that when we do the enrollment projection, there's P1 and P2. Could you just go over really quick the difference between P1 when we do P1 and P2?
Yeah, there's just periods in time. P1 typically ends December 15th as the cutoff, and it's due to the state right around January. That just marks beginning of school, first day, up until that period of time to mark the enrollment, and then what they calculate is the actual attendance. So that gives us our first marker, how we're doing, and then that's an official report that goes in, and also an opportunity for us to be really looking at, are we seeing some scary declines, or are we looking like we're stabilizing or improving? P2 is the other one that's really super important because that is the one that determines funding for the next year. So that one ends right around mid-April-ish. So we have to work really closely with our academic offices to make sure that the calendar is properly, of course, aligned for students' needs, but also that it's beneficial when it comes to reporting P2, that we're capturing as many attendance days in that reporting period. So they're markers in time.
Okay, and this is just a piggyback off of Member Garcia's question. So P2 is our final count. Have we looked at just our P2 counts to see how close they've been with our projections in the past?
I've not, but I can't say staff has not, so I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, because I'd be interested to see actually, because if P2 is a finite count, to see what the trend is in terms of Sac City's projection with what is the actual. Because as I'm seeing, when I'm looking at this, it also seems like Sac City's, we're conservative with our numbers and high on expenditures, which, I think we do that because we want to make sure that, we're within budget. But it's also important to me that we get as close as possible, only because we know some of those dollars, right? While it is going to the reserve, I think it's really important that we know we have needs now for our students. And so for me as a board member, I like to actually just kind of see how close we are in terms of the projection that we've made in comparison to the P2. Just because for me, I think it's really important just to see the range of projections. It gives me a good analysis as a board member in terms of just our risk and our benefits.
Yep.
So,
Agree.
So if you can, report back in terms of the P2, that would be great. I would like to see the trend on that.
Sure. I just wanted to, Jackie just reminded me to share with you, because our enrollment is declining, the state holds you harmless for 1 year. So we've been funded historically on the prior year. So hopefully we'll get to that point where that'll be reversed. But yes, it's a good analysis nonetheless.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I think Member Garcia asked this already, but I'm going to ask it again just for clarity for our parents. So how do we determine enrollment projection again? And you said it was Decision Insight.
Right now,
The information we give to Decision Insight, right?
Yeah, right now the district is transitioning to Decision Insight. But basically the way enrollment projections are done, I have not taken a deeper dive into Sac City, but I can speak from experience, is that you do a historical trend analysis that you spoke to earlier, and you consider all the factors that are unique to your district. And so that's what you use as a basis, what students will progress to the next level, but you just can't assume that that's going to happen because there's some unique things that go on in certain schools. I can just speak from other districts. There are some schools where it was pretty typical that we would see a little spike in the beginning of school year only because parents, sometimes delayed registering for students. And so we were prepared for those kinds of things. So I'll have to take a really closer look to see how Sac City deals with all the different nuances, because it's a large district, lots of schools in different parts of town, and they may respond a little differently. Do you have any information? No, okay.
Any other questions, Board Member Vang?
Yes, just one more regarding one-stop staffing. I know these are SCOE's suggested next steps, document one-stop staffing process. If you can kind of just speak a little bit more about that.
I think that speaks to the transparency, just making sure that it's clear and all the parties that should be involved are involved and know what their role is in one-stop staffing. Whether it's our human resource department, knowing what the FTE should be for that enrollment, your budget department, making sure that they know what the funding is needed for that particular school, whether it's, a regular general fund unrestricted or a special restricted fund. And just making sure that you do have the capacity at your school sites to support student population, because we just have some different capacity issues at some of our sites where we have some schools that are very popular and some where we do have more declining enrollment. So just making sure you're documenting all that. Let me see, one-stop. I'm trying to think of all the
And
players.
Our principals and staff are involved in the one-stop.
Absolutely. They're key to that because they're part of that discussion. The way it should roll is that when you start to have those discussions, they're at the table from day one, talking about we're projecting an enrollment of whatever number for your site, so therefore you will get X number of FTE, and then we start talking about their needs. If there is a school that, I'm just going to throw something out there, dual immersion, and maybe that requires additional staffing, or they have a special program, they're an SDC site, they require different and special staffing. So there's all those discussions, and maybe this site is going to be an AVID site next year, and so we need to hear that from the principal.
And how much agency do our principals have in that process? I guess I'd also ask that because I had a principal that I spoke to who told me she lost 2 teachers because of miscalculation of projections at her site level. And so I'm just interested to also know in terms of the processes, like what type of agency does the principal, do he or she has a big say in the enrollment projections at the site level? Is it determined just with the information that staff is given saying, hey, principal, this is what your projection is going to be?
It's a two-way dialogue because we do start off with the enrollment projections, and if they know something new that we don't, like they know that I don't know, I'm going to say that maybe there's an apartment complex that shut down, and so they're going to expect to lose a whole bunch of students. We wouldn't be privy to that information. There's specific information that happens in communities that principals are privy to that we are not. So it should be a two-way dialogue when there's those kinds of conversations. This is going to be my first round in one-stop staffing, so I'd be happy to share as much as I can. And right now, I'm really trying to understand and learn the process from all of our staff. But do you have anything to share on? Yeah, were you part of it? Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it for right now. Thank you, Ms. Ramos.
Sure.
Superintendent Aguilar,
I
did
will
you have a
also say,
comment?
both to Member Vang and Member Garcia, who also alluded to this, in terms of One Stop, just keep in mind that we're continuing to refine that process as we integrate the SIPSA process and what our principals are putting forward as interventions that they believe in terms of investments will result in better student outcomes. And so that is something that this year we will incorporate into the one-stop process so that as we've heard from our community, every budget and instructional decision is based on student outcomes. There's also going to be some refinements that are required that might impact our traditional timelines, for example, with open enrollment. At the moment, we don't learn about the results of open enrollment until after One Stop. And so this is also going to be a place where we're going to have to change the way that we've timelined some of these decision points. But again, all in service to student achievement driven by our SIPSA process. So again, you'll just continue to hear, we did present to the FTAC committee, I think 2 meetings ago, where we stand with those changes to the SIPSA process. Our goal is for that to all come together in a more robust one-stop process.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. I will be very brief because of the level of detail with which we have gone into these questions. This obviously is a very important conversation given the gravity of the fiscal situation. I want to just begin by thanking you for, in addition to this conversation we've had right now, making time to have 2-by deep dives with board members to help board members understand the variations that we've seen from the submitted budget to tonight. I also want to just appreciate your explanation of use of one-time funds. Obviously, the FCMAT report found that one of the very grave implications of past bad budgeting practice for Sac City Unified is that we have historically used one-time funds to cover ongoing expenses, and that cannot happen if we are going to safeguard our fiscal status. So I appreciated the explanation of the school site expenditures. Several times during tonight's presentation, there were terms used like reasonable and acceptable when we're talking about variances. And it does occur to me as we get into the nuances of what it means if you're 0.5% off from enrollment projections, or if you find a variance in the projected versus actuals, that there is a desire to be perfect. And while I think we should always strive in a mindset of continuous improvement for bettering our process because we know that it is inadequate and that we can do better, I think it would be helpful for the board moving forward if we understood what a reasonable variance looked like. So for instance, Ms. Ramos, one of the reasons I was excited by your appointment is that you come with a wealth of experience from other school districts. You have been at a large community college district as well. I'd like you to tell us, in your experience, what is a reasonable variance? Is 0.5% a significant variance from what you see in your past practice?
That is pretty good. That is actually very reasonable from what I've seen. And not only, you don't have to just take it from me, but there's a really important document in your budget. I know there's tons of pages in there, but it's referred to as it's called Standard and Criterias. And there are some measurements of percentage variances that are given there that where you should be within certain ranges. And of course, because of our budget deficit, we're out of the range. But as far as your enrollment projections and some other things, you can use that as a guide to see how far off you are as well. But 0.5% is pretty good. 1%, especially you're a huge district. I mean, you're talking, almost 50,000 students here. That is pretty close. But we can certainly bring back information just so that you can start comparing. In my past districts, it was typical 0.5% to 1% was pretty much.
I think that would be helpful, just as board members requested for detailed explanation of the measures that were being taken to perfect those projections. It would be helpful to understand, based on past experience and like districts, what reasonable variance looks like. I did also want to ask about the data point that projects a 4% increase in healthcare costs. How did you arrive at that projected increase?
That was arrived at looking at past trends, and also we get information from our health carriers right about this time. They've already put out the rates for the new year, so we do know, we have that information. And then we just go back and kind of look at trends, and then we know what's going on in the industry, what to expect, and they kind of start feeding, our carriers start to feed us information through our broker, what we can expect in the future years. So it's a combination of those two things, what we actually know and what we expect to know based on information we get from our broker.
Wonderful. Ms. Ramos, thank you. I appreciate that. I think as you continue to settle into your role and peel back the layers, having updates at the monthly ThickTac meetings of what you are doing to find modest incremental savings would be helpful. I am also very aware of the fact that when we have students who are desperate for the resources they need to meet their full potential, leaving a dollar on the table can feel very uncomfortable. But I do find myself very concerned that we would be debating whether or not we should have 2 months of salary in a reserve, because we are in the longest period of economic boom in California's history and due for a recession. And so I would argue that if we are not smart about how we establish a reasonable reserve based on what we have seen to be best practices, we do far more damage to students in the long run with catastrophic cuts. And so I would like to hear your plan, recognizing as we move forward that you will develop it, for guarding against that.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate your work, Ms. Ramos, and also you, Ms. Canfield. So this is an item for action. Do we have a motion to adopt the budget revision?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Student preferential vote? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you.
And for the record, we almost went 10 minutes over on a 15-minute.
Yes, we're running significantly behind. Moving on to item 10.1. Is this, okay. Employee organizational reports. Our first organizational report will be SCTA. Per section 18.12, we had a notification from Tuesday noon that the SCTA certificated bargaining unit will be using up to 15 minutes for the fiscal accountability and transparency topic, staffing crisis, special education and MTSS, African American suspension and restorative practices, safe haven and professional development for educators, retro pay, health insurance, Brown Act, school and community first ballot initiative, district communication, split classes and concapping, and testing of students.
Hello, my name is David Fisher, President of the Sacramento City Teachers Association. Tonight we're going to be concentrating mostly on district communication. We've been concerned for some time about the district's communication to the public, mostly about its teachers. For the past year or more, the district, primarily through Chief Communication Officer Alex Barrios, has initiated a concerted campaign against its own teachers. So, because of these concerns, and knowing that it's actually illegal for a district to use taxpayer dollars to purposely undermine a certified collective bargaining agent like our union, on May 20th and May 29th, 2019, we filed 2 California Public Records Act requests. The first sought correspondence from Alex Barrios, the district's chief communication officer, and the second asked for communication between representatives of the district and the Sacramento Bee. Before making these requests, we had raised concerns about Mr. Barrios' conduct directly with the superintendent and board president Ryan, particularly Mr. Barrios' late-night activities, his sometimes hostile engagement with teachers, and his concerted smear campaign against SCTA. The chief communications officer of the district is the district's public face to the broader Sac City community. By job description, he serves on the superintendent's cabinet and executive staff. His responsibilities include, but are not limited to, communicate and represent the district's vision and perspective internally and to the general public and community. As designated by the superintendent, specifically, the chief communications officer is supposed to communicate and collaborate with the superintendent, cabinet, and executive staff, Board of Education, other administrators, and district personnel to coordinate activities and programs, resolve issues and conflicts, and exchange information, and model district standards of ethics and professionalism. To carry out these responsibilities, our Chief Communication Officer is well compensated with at least $160,000 per year in salary alone. In addition, he directs a staff of several communication professionals. So we think it's entirely reasonable to expect our Chief Communication Officer to abide by the requirements of the job description, board policy, and general ethical professional standards. Unfortunately, that does not seem to be the case. As I mentioned earlier, we made our Public Records Act in May 2019. 5 months later, the district still has not come close to complying with the request. Production is slow walked through the legal department, which produces batches of documents in small increments. Just this past Monday, we received the latest batch, and we are beginning to understand why the district has been so reluctant to produce these documents. The first thing that becomes obvious is that when SCTA requests documents, the request is sent to the district's in-house counsel. A response is never timely and invariably includes a statement asking us to justify why we're making the request. Then after multiple reminders and months pass, the district will finally begin to trickle out documents. Contrast that with how the district's chief communication officer responded to a request from the Sacramento Bee columnist, Marcos Breton. On Saturday, February 13th, 2019, Mr. Breton requested any correspondence between the district and SCTA related to healthcare negotiations. Mr. Breton made his request directly to Mr. Barrios. On Tuesday, February 26, 2019, without going through the legal department, Mr. Barrios produced a set of documents for Mr. Breton. The contrast could not be starker. It takes the district 5 months to respond to SCTA. It takes Mr. Barrios fewer than 5 days, including the weekends, to respond to Marcos Breton. As mentioned, we've been raising concerns about this behavior for years, including directly with Superintendent Aguilar and Board President Ryan. The information provided in the recent documentation makes it clear that our concerns were well-founded. We further believe that we only have the tip of the iceberg, and that's why the district has been so slow to provide information it is legally required to turn over. This is not the first time these issues have been raised. Back in the fall of 2017, we wrote to Superintendent Aguilar that we were concerned about Mr. Barrios' late-night Facebook post in response to well-respected teachers who were expressing concerns about charter schools. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Mr. Barrios posted the following.
And this is Alex Barrios, to a teacher, an employee of our school district. He commonly invokes we, us, as the district. I know the superintendent better than you do, Lori. Just friggin', oh, and excuse me, I'm quoting that word. I don't even allow my teenager to use that word. Cut it out already with the unverified conspiracy theories. If you want to have an adverse relationship, then that's what you're gonna get.
We have several examples using the exact same kind of language. So Mr. Aguilar never responded to those concerns. Fast forward to the fall of 2018, Mr. Barrios organized a press conference to announce that an agreement had been reached among the various unions at Sac City to reduce healthcare costs. An agreement that SCT and the district had signed back in November of 2017 when we settled the contract. So we all know the entire event was a publicity stunt designed to try to embarrass the leadership of SCTA. Mr. Barrios orchestrated a condemnation of me personally and other SCTA leaders by pointing to an empty chair. Never once did he point out that I told him that SCTA would not participate. By the way, he texted me that day to come to a meeting that night to sign something I'd never seen in my life. So it was obviously a setup. But we weren't participating because we had reached an agreement with the district the year before and already signed it. Instead, Mr. Barrios and others made much of the fact that I was at my son's soccer game. Mr. Barrios went on to smear SCTA by repeating claims that we didn't care about our students and our district, and even though our agreement on the health plan savings guarantees that the district must redirect millions of dollars back into the classrooms. Since then, Board President Ryan and Chief Human Resource Officer Cathy McCarn, among others, have told me that they believe that the empty chair stunt and including information about my son was inappropriate and crossed the line. Nothing was done about it. In fact, the video of that same stunt remains centrally positioned on the district website today. Then, December 15th, 2019, Mr. Barrios actually called the cell phone of the wife of our executive director at 1:05 a.m. in the morning. When we raised concern about this, it took 2 complaints and several days for Mr. Aguilar to respond. His response was less than reassuring. Mr. Barrios was, quote, doing some late-night online searching and inadvertently called her. Why was Mr. Barrios conducting late online research of the wife of our executive director?
Criminal background check because of the way he treats our staff. That's why.
You see what I mean? Again, in contrast of his
Mr.
wife.
Barrios, this
Again,
is not
in
a
contrast,
dialogue.
consider Board President Ryan's reaction to the inclusion of her phone number on an informational flyer for her constituents, the same number that we suspect all of you have used to conduct school business with Ryan for years. However, can you imagine the outpouring of criticism that we would receive if an SCTA leader called the cell phone of the spouse of Superintendent Aguilar or Board President Ryan at 1:05 in the morning, and when asked to explain was told that they were doing late-night research of their spouse? Or if we had included information about the activity of their children as a criticism of their leadership when speaking to the media, and then kept it on the website for months. Unfortunately, the efforts to undermine the leadership of our union doesn't stop there. When the district first asserted it was facing insolvency, it began to provide updates to those who opted in to receive district information about the budget. The updates also encouraged recipients to respond and submit comments. Apparently to Mr. Barrios, those comments were not just solicit feedback of the district, but also, if the opportunity presented itself, to provide fodder for the district's propaganda campaign against SCTA. Imagine our surprise when one of the records we just obtained through the PRA showed that Mr. Barrios forwarded almost immediately the comment of a McClatchy teacher critical of the district directly to B opinion columnist Marcos Bertone. And Mr. Bertone incorporated that exact info into one of his opinion pieces designed to smear the leadership of SCTA. Does the superintendent and board president condone the chief communication officer forwarding comments from the community to Mr. Bertone for political purposes? If so, shouldn't the district include a waiver on the comment form that the public should be aware that making comments that are critical of district leadership may be forwarded to a bullying opinion columnist at the Sacramento Bee for political purposes? Mr. Barrios has also blocked teachers, parents, and other community stakeholders from posting on the district Facebook, removing any comments, even mildly critical of the district. This practice only ended after we threatened to sue the district over the illegal conduct. It's clear to us that he is either acting on his own as sort of a rogue employee, or he's acting at the direction of certain leaders in the district. And I use the word certain leaders intentionally, because Mr. Barrios also appears to believe that it's his role to undermine the credibility of certain elected school board members and other elected officials. In February 2019, Assemblymember Kevin McCarty requested authorization from the Joint Legislative Audit Committee for a forensic audit of the district. Officially, Superintendent Aguilar and Board President Ryan said they supported the audit. Or did they? Shortly after Assemblymember McCarty announced his request, Mr. Barrios initiated a campaign to undermine both McCarty and his wife, Board Member Garcia, suggesting to a Sacramento Bee reporter that Ms. Garcia may have leaked confidential closed session board discussions to her husband, and that Assemblymember McCarty had a conflict of interest because teachers associations have donated to his campaign. The actual email.
Yes, this is from Alex Barrios, the Chief Communications Officer of our district, paid with taxpayer dollars, to Bee reporter. Her name is Leticia Garcia. She was sworn in back in December of 2018. You should ask him if it poses a potential conflict of interest for her to be in confidential closed session discussions about district business while he is asking for a forensic audit of the district. In fact, I think the far more interesting story for you is about whether McCarty and his wife have a potential conflict of interest, especially since McCarty is taking teacher association money for his campaigns.
So the question is, was Mr. Barrios directed by the superintendent or Board President Ryan to suggest that Board Member Garcia and Assemblymember McCarty had conflict of interest, or is he acting on his own? His mission appears to be to both unlawfully undermine SCTA and to undermine even certain elected board members for whom he purports to work, which returns us to the central question. Is Mr. Barrios acting on his own, as sort of an rogue employee, or is he being directed to do this work by the superintendent and/or the board president? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I appreciate that you're citing back to 2017 before I was board president, but we will look into the documents that you provided this evening. SEIU organizational report. TCS organizational report. Teamsters organizational report. UPE organizational report.
Thank you. Rich Owen, representing United Professional Educators. President Ryan, Superintendent, distinguished members of the board. I have some prepared comments that I'd like to read to you. UPE is very concerned about school safety. We are not only school leaders, but we are parents and grandparents as well. School safety is fundamental and non-negotiable. Recent incidents at our school should raise alarm bells for this board, and you should do a deep dive on it immediately. As the public becomes aware of the monthly crime reports and incidents at schools, you will be forced to reconsider your current practices and policies. One tragic incident, and you'll change every last one of those policies. School personnel, and I include all school personnel, are not trained and cannot be expected to disrupt violent incidents at schools. This board needs to re-engage on this issue before there is a tragic incident at one of our schools. And it's a very serious matter that's happening right now in our district. Secondly, number two, recently SEIU filed a grievance against the district with regard to the carpet cleaners. UPE wishes to express its support of SEIU in that grievance. Oftentimes when budget cuts happen, SEIU takes it on the chin. We think it's very unfair and unreasonable, and would ask the board to look into that. Number three, UPE strongly encourages the district and SCTA to resolve their differences. We are a declining enrollment district, and that, combined with the constant labor strife, will necessitate parents and students to reconsider or to consider leaving the district, which in turn will harm all parties. Furthermore, most experts predict that we will experience a recession within the next couple of years, which the board president just talked about, which will further exacerbate our problems. Currently, 91% of your budget is tied up in personnel costs, whereas the average, just confirmed with Superintendent Gordon, is in the mid-80s to high 80s across the county. This cannot stand, and it's definitely not something that we can sustain given that our enrollment continues to decline. More importantly, we all know that when districts catch a cold, students of color, English language learners, and poor children catch pneumonia. That is unacceptable and will constitute the equivalent of what we refer to as educational apartheid. Not acceptable. I want to close with a bit of African folklore that says, when we seek revenge, when we don't forgive, when we attack without being concerned about where the spears land, when we fail to compromise in the interests of the village, be prepared to dig two graves.
That's right.
We all will go down in this boat if we don't come together real soon. Lastly, UPE wants to encourage this board, and I'll close with this comment. UPE wants to encourage this board to stay tightly aligned, because your unity will be the major factor in determining whether we survive and thrive. There will be those who seek to destroy this superintendent.
I need you to wrap up.
I'm doing it now. Some will seek to drive a wedge among you and others in the district, and I can tell you that the key indicator as to whether we will fulfill our promise to students is whether you stick together.
Thank you. Item 10.2, the District Parent Advisory Committees. Our Community Advisory Committee. CAC is not speaking tonight? Oh, they spoke earlier. Thank you. District English Learner Advisory Committee. Local Control Accountability Plan / Parent Advisory Committee.
Good evening, Board. I'd just like to say that I'm honored to speak on behalf of other members of the committee who are back there, and I hope I do well by them. Good evening, President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, members of the board, and community members viewing this meeting. My name is Maria Rodriguez, and I am a newly appointed member of the LPAC Parent Advisory Committee. Our committee met on Monday, September 23rd in the Washington Conference Room on the second floor of this building. All of our meetings are open to the public, and we encourage attendance and engagement with our committee. For those viewing tonight's meeting who may not know, the LCAP Parent Advisory Committee is mandated per California Education Code. This committee reviews the school district's local control accountability plan and provides feedback and questions to the school district administration. Thanks. At our September 23rd meeting, we were introduced to newly hired SCUSD LCAP SIPSA coordinator Stephen Fong. Stephen comes from Alameda Unified School District, where he helped author that district's LCAP. Sean Alexander then led us in an exercise where we broke into small groups and were asked to reflect on past group experiences. We were to come up with 3 words that describe groups which worked well together, and then 3 words that describe groups that did not work well together. That exercise led smoothly into our next agenda item, which was to discuss and develop the group norms. This was a valuable discussion as we generally had consensus on how we will engage with each other to ensure that we have productive group dynamics as we go forward into the work of this committee. A couple of noteworthy points. One of our members phoned into the meeting since she was not able to travel to Cerna Center that night. It is important that we all do all that we can to have stakeholders at the table. Second, as we discuss the group norms, we recognize that these are ideals. There will be times that many of us may break a norm, but we will continue to strive towards respecting each other. I left a copy of our still in development group norms for each board member. Next, Kelly Odipo led us through a reading of the executive summary of the LCAP. There are 4 goals to SCUSD's plan, and the diversity of this committee was highlighted to me as I observed different perspectives on which of the 4 goals was the first and primary goal, after which others would logically follow. I can tell you this will be a very engaged and vibrant parent advisory committee. Next, and importantly, we reviewed Sacramento County Office of Education's meeting notes about upcoming changes to the LCAP template. Since the template and our review of it is still in process, we are in information gathering and understanding phase right now. Lastly, we had a hearty discussion about roles and responsibilities of a co-facilitator to this committee. Again, my observation is that the LCAP PAC is a very engaged and deeply qualified group of stakeholders who truly care about the students of Sacramento. Good job on your appointments, board members.
Thank you.
And our next meeting is Monday, October 28th, 6 o'clock.
Perfect. Thank you both. I really appreciate the norms that you've set up. I think that they're what we should all aspire to in terms of engagement in a respectful and constructive way, and it's a model to us and others. Thank you.
Thank you. That's why I wanted you all to see them.
Item 10.3, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, President Ryan. I'm going to be brief and just point to a couple of things. One is I was not able to attend the press event that took place launching our RT program that gives students the ability to ride our transit services for free, but I did hear that it was a very well-attended and powerful event. But today I also wanted to discuss very briefly that both Member Minnick and I had the opportunity to be part of a wonderful event at Earl Warren Elementary School in which Comcast, through their Internet Essentials program, gave away over 200 laptops to students at Earl Warren. And I just shared earlier with others how powerful it was for Member Minnick and I and others in the audience to see the reactions of some of our students, some of whom shed tears of joy as a result of being given this wonderful gift by this partner. And it just led me to think about what we said in the last board meeting, which is the power of collaborations with partners inside and out of the district in meeting the needs of our students. And I hope to stay motivated and seek even more partnerships with other partners as we continue to strive to address our financial challenges in the interest and the obligation that we have to meet the needs of all of our students. So I just wanted to really just give you that report because it was a very powerful testimony of what I think is possible in Sacramento, and it was a great reminder leading up to today's board meeting.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. Item 10.4, the President's Report. I had planned this evening to speak about National Bullying Prevention Month, which is October. I think it's a very timely topic given so much of what we've heard tonight. I do just want to say we often hear from our community advisory council and our parent advisory groups that children are struggling with feeling marginalized, being ostracized, and not becoming a part of their school communities. And we know that that takes the form of bullying on school sites and cyberbullying that can lead to depression and really a grave reduction in student achievement. But I want to just talk about recognizing that National Bullying Prevention Month is October, the vitriol and division that we're experiencing now in the district at a level that I think, while challenging over the years, seems to be even more toxic right now. As someone who's spent my career building coalitions and agreeing to disagree respectfully, I have to tell you, it is very troubling to me when I see a politics of personal destruction being practiced. When I think about how we end bullying, I think about humanizing individuals versus ceasing to see the person across the room as a human being, as someone we are connected to in any way. I cannot imagine being so jaded, so cynical, despite decades of dysfunction, that we would cease to offer an olive branch, that we would cease to model good behavior, and that we would cease to attempt to find a path forward. I can tell you I have been the target of a great deal of bullying over the course of the last year. Most often, I don't speak about those incidents. When I see someone else being bullied, I will always speak up. But at the end of the day, as we encounter a national atmosphere aimed at division, aimed at promoting hate rhetoric, aimed at ensuring that good people who should be working together become enemies, we must model something different. I refuse to say that the ugliness has led me to be so bitter that we will not find commonality, but it begins here. Sacramento has often talked about the fact that we are a compassionate city. Well, we should be committed to a compassion campaign, because if we cannot model kindness for our children, if we cannot model adult student-centered behavior that is rooted in ethics, that is rooted in ensuring that all children and all adults feel welcomed in this district, then shame on us. And I personally am committed to trying tomorrow and every day following to continue to model the kind of behavior I would hope to see from my children, I would expect to see from my community members, and I know the vast majority of our hardworking staff exhibit day in, day out. Item 10.5, the Student Board Member Report.
Thank you, President Ryan. This time in the school year is probably one of the most stressful for high school seniors, many of whom are waist deep in the college admission process at this point. but I think it brings to light an important question, which is where do we draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition? So when asking this question with students from different high schools across our district, I've come to the conclusion that I think we should do away with class rank. So to explain why I and many other high schoolers support the discontinuation of class rank, I want to dive a little deeper into this issue. So class rank has been practiced as a long-standing tradition for schools aimed to reward students who get or end up at number one and to motivate high school students to strive to get there. In recent years, many high schools across the country no longer record class rank, and for good reason. Contrary to the positive image that class rank may portray, the reality of the practice comes down to a handful of overachievers battling it out for minuscule differences in GPA. Particularly among the top tier of students, the differences in GPA are statistically insignificant, and this rat race to outrank each other encourages students when choosing classes to prioritize the point value of a class over the actual content of that course. A system of class rank clearly discourages students from taking photography, orchestra, art, or other non-weighted classes, even if a student might be interested in those subjects or could potentially benefit from those courses. In effect, class rank makes school a strategic game. Now, the primary argument for maintaining class rank is that students need it for college, or that without class rank, students will be at a college application disadvantage. Well, according to the Washington Post, and I quote, "Ranking provides little if any practical benefit. Class rank has much less significance to college admissions officers than a range of other factors. And the proportion of colleges that view it as an important consideration has been dropping steadily. Even a decade ago, according to the National Association of College Admission Counseling, nearly 40% of high schools had either dropped or stopped ranking their students or refused to share those numbers with colleges, a shift that apparently has no effect on students' prospects of admission. More recently, college admissions officers said that they had seen a steep drop-off in the number of applicants who come from schools that rank students. Because many high schoolers no longer use class rank, the practice has been rendered unnecessary for the college admission process. And if your school does not have a class rank, you don't need to report it. Class rank shifts the focus from learning to achievement and teaches students to regard their peers not as friends or allies, but as potential barriers to their academic success. Ergo, class rank promotes a gratuitously stressful high school experience while concurrently destroying the sense of community and any potential for peer support that can help students get through those 4 years intact. My point is that ending the practice of class rank in no way hurts students and instead can positively transform school environments and student mental health. The goal of my report today is to safeguard a healthy perspective of academic success, and therefore I strongly encourage the district to consider abolishing class rank altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Board Member Ang Olson, I have to tell you, you're the reason I refuse to be cynical, because you are the future, and that was such a beautiful and well-articulated argument. Item 10.6, information sharing by board members. It looks like we have a comment by Board Member Morowski.
Thank you, President Ryan. A couple of things I wanted to mention. We have our Fiscal Transparency and Accountability Committee meeting on October 10th. That's next Thursday. It's our normal meeting time that we're trying to hew to as much as we can. It will be at 6 p.m. here at the Cerna Center. We will be taking on a deep dive into healthcare costs. This is a big cost driver for our district and an outlier for our district, so we'll be doing a deep dive. And I hope as many people in the community who are interested in learning more about this topic can join us, and I appreciate if you share that information out as well. The other thing I wanted to mention is I am concerned about the vaping crisis that has been occurring across our state, our nation. The County of Sacramento reports 20 cases of severe acute pulmonary disease requiring hospitalization and respiratory support among previously healthy people reported in California counties and 1 case in Sacramento County. It's something that we really need our students to be aware of, and their parents, frankly. It is not safe for folks to be doing. We don't know a lot about these chemicals, and I just look forward to engaging with staff further to figure out how we can amplify that message across our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Morowski. Vice President Wu.
Thank you, President Ryan. what you said about bullying is one of the key factors in implicit bias. So I want us to remember that. We will be hopefully bringing implicit bias to the board and lessons and
Implicit bias training, not implicit bias. Just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Working to unpack that every day.
I want to bring forward an idea that we have at MLK, which is one of my K-8 schools. They're going to be bringing fingerprinting because they want to increase parent participation at the school. It will occur during November 22nd, 2019. It's a Friday. It's the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
They are going to be having their annual turkey trot fun run. So they will be having live scan there. We will. I will be there to encourage them and promote this.
Thank you very much, Vice President Wu. Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but your comments really kind of got me. And I agree. This bullying has got to stop to be able to move our district forward. I don't know why there is a smear campaign on our superintendent and our board president, but if you look at the majority of our votes that are up here, they are usually unanimous, and we are strong. So I just wanted to thank Rich for his comments about staying strong and being together, because he's right. We will be digging two graves together, and it's our kids that's going to suffer. But we've got to do this together. And you know, I have one message for the people that are creating these bullying tactics, and it is we are here. We are here to listen, and it's not about what we want, but it's what it is right. So let's work together.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Pritchett. Board Member Garcia.
Yes, I would like to announce a community meeting on Wednesday, October 9th at Wilsey Wood Middle School to outline the desired characteristics for the director of the school safety position. So I'd encourage interested parents, community members, educators, just to attend this meeting and share your thoughts of what you'd like to see in the next director for school safety, the school safety position. So this is at 5:30, from 5:30 to 6:30, again at Wilsey Wood Middle School on Wednesday, October 9th.
Thank you, Board Member Garcia. We have a final comment by Superintendent Aguilar.
Sorry, President Ryan, just very quickly, I do want to just make clear, because we have still members of our community here, and it struck me as I was thinking about tonight's agenda that this is the first agenda in many, many months where we have not presented to the members of our community something related to student achievement. We made a commitment soon after I arrived as a board that every single board meeting would contain something related to student achievement. And it struck me today listening to our new CBO, Rose Ramos, and Ms. Jackie Canfield, that this is probably the first agenda in a very long time that did not have a board presentation about student achievement. I don't necessarily apologize for that. That's by design that we had to focus on budget today. But I do want to call out the importance of us staying very focused beyond our budget crisis on student achievement. Our community has called for that. Our board has made a commitment to focus on that. I've had wonderful, inspiring, and motivating conversations with members of our public, with parents, that have said that they no longer want to be told that their child is doing great in school. They want evidence. They want to be able to see something in front of them that gives them confidence that their child is progressing academically. So I want to just encourage the board, not the board, but the members of our public to be patient with us. Excuse the fact that today we did not include a presentation focused on student achievement, but it's only because of the importance of adopting or voting on a revised budget. We will go right back to focusing on student achievement and hope that we can stay very balanced in both trying to address our long-term budget challenges, but finally, as a district, making a concerted commitment and one that you will not let us off the hook that focuses on student achievement. We are still an underperforming school district, and we have the ability to transform it into a high poverty, high achieving school district. So just wanted to mention that, President Ryan.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. This is the end of our communications items. Item 11.0, Board Workshop, Strategic Plan, and Other Initiatives. Item 11.1, Approve Resolution Number 3105, the resolution to accept the surrender charter of NorCal Trade and Tech Charter School.
Oh, okay. Very good. Good evening, Board President Ryan, board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Vincent Harris, Chief of Continuous Improvement and Accountability. Tonight, we're here for the adoption of Resolution 3105, which is basically to accept the surrender of the NorCal Trade Tech Charter School. I'm joined this evening by our new Director of Innovative Schools and Charter School Oversight, Mr. Jesse Ramos, and one of our attorneys, Ed Sacklar.
Welcome, Mr. Ramos.
So the purpose of this meeting, this agenda item specifically, is to briefly discuss the background on Nortel, but more importantly, speak to the notice of violations, which the board reviewed on August 1st of this year, and then talk about briefly the mitigation of some of the risks in the surrendering of the charter to the Sac City community, and most importantly, seek the adoption of the resolution 31005. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Ramos.
Good evening, President Ryan, trustees, and Superintendent Aguilar. I will begin with a brief background of NorCal Trade and Tech. One of the intentions of the creations of a charter school is to foster reform and innovation. And it was with that belief that the petition for NorCal Trade and Tech was approved. As stated in the petition, the program was for students over 18 years old. It was going to provide an opportunity for students to earn a high school diploma while receiving career training and to assist them in earning a livable wage. On August 1st, because of concerns identified by staff, it was agreed to notice the leadership of NorCal Trade and Tech of the violations listed. This notice of violations is a significant action. It is the first step of the revocation process. Shortly after receiving the notice of violations, the board of NorCal Trade and Tech took action to surrender its charter. The district was notified of their decision on September 5th. After consulting with legal counsel, the staff decided that the best course of action was to draft a resolution to formally accept the surrender charter of NorCal Trade and Tech, as well as to clearly stipulate the obligations the school has in the closing of the school. The resolution directs the leadership of NorCal Trade and Tech to take specific actions on various aspects of school management, such as facilities, equipment, personnel, and students. I'm going to go back to one bullet. It also clearly states that the NorCal Trade and Tech will collaborate with the district on the closing process of the school. The closing of the school poses minimal risk as long as we provide oversight and carefully monitor their adherence to the procedures outlined in their petition, Resolution 3105, and all applicable laws. The resolution is designed to protect students and the district from harm caused by the collapse of the school. For example, on the management of assets, it states how donations will be returned and how assets of the charter will be surrendered to the superintendent and or his designees. For the protection of students, it states the proper management of student files, and to support students impacted by the closure, they are required to inform them of attendance options for the upcoming school year. In summary, the district staff recommends the board conference to take action to accept the surrendered charter of NorCal Trade and Tech under the terms outlined in the resolution number 3105. The reasons for the recommendation are volunteer closure is much more efficient than the revocation of a charter. And as stated earlier, the resolution articulates the school's obligations to close its doors, to correctly manage shutting down the school. It directs school leadership to take specific actions on the management of facilities, equipment, personnel, and students. And this concludes our presentation. We're open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comments.
So I just want to begin by saying that I have a strong recollection of the night this charter application came to the board. Board member Vang and I voted against this application. We had some grave concerns about the viability of the application as written. I remember the vision being well articulated, but the application demonstrating a complete inability to guard the fiduciary responsibility of a healthy, functioning school site, and to roll out a plan for student achievement that would meet the needs of students at the level that was being articulated. In fact, it was one of the worst charter applications I've ever read. So I appreciate that we've come to this place today. However, it is not lost on me that now we're in a position where we have students who have actually attended this school, and they are left to question whether or not their credits will be transferred, whether or not they will be granted their graduation because they believe they have met the legal graduation requirements, and their lives have been unsettled. And so I want to ask what we're doing to support those students. And you know, once again, I know this is not your fault in any way as a new person to the district, and district staff did in fact express concerns as well on this charter application. I am just so deeply sorry that this is where we are today after unsettling students and families at the level I know we have.
So I will say we are committed to making sure that the students are taken care of and that we're going to address their concerns. The steps we're taking right now is to reach out to the existing management of the charter school, and that is a portion of why we were requesting the passage of Resolution 3105, because as part of that, it clearly articulates some of the requirements, including the management of student files, their transcripts, and then also with regards to their transition from the school to another placement. And as part of the oversight of the school, we are committed to making sure that students who have been impacted by this closure We'll be monitoring how the school responds to their needs, but also will be another resource to see if we can come up with other possible solutions to help support them in the transition.
I do have a follow-up question on that. I know that school closures were before my time on the board, but that there were, crisis intervention teams that worked with families and students to ensure that their emotional needs were being met. I'm looking to Victoria Flores. Are we doing anything like this, recognizing the closure of this school site will have impact on the emotional well-being of students and families? I would ask that we do. I think whether it's a traditional public school or a public charter, our students are going to still have the same emotional response. And we need to make sure that we're providing the wraparound support necessary to help pick them up. Board Member Vang.
So before I move to approve the resolution, I think I echo many of the sentiment from President Ryan. I just had a question regarding facilities in particular, because when NorCal Trade and Tech Charter was approved by other fellow board members, I believe one of the facilities was the 24th and Florin building. Cathy, could you give us a little bit on the timeline? Did they ever move in officially? Did they use any parts of the facility, and what the timeline would be?
They did. They moved into 2 of the portables for office space in the front, and then they occupied, I'm not sure how many of the 5 modulars in the back, but they were there on a daily basis for a while.
Okay. And what's the timeline in terms of them moving out from the facilities?
They're gone.
They're gone, okay.
Yeah, they're gone.
Okay. So with that, I, make a move to
And I will second it. Student preferential vote.
It's a 2-step process.
We actually have 2 more comments. Board Member Minnick.
Thanks. So first, Ms. Ramos, welcome, and I really appreciate your responsiveness when I had some questions on this week. So I appreciate that. I'm sorry that your first time presenting to us was not to present us with some awesome, amazing new thing that we could approve, and that it's this.
It's only up from here.
But I guess that's part of the gig. This is, I'm very bummed about how this turned out. I think, like some of my colleagues, we had some high expectations and high hopes for this because, again, the vision behind it was so cool, and it's disappointing that it turned out this way. And I just hope, kind of moving forward, that this experience doesn't soil us if another proposal comes our way that with similar vision. Because I think that the way that this could have served so many adults in our community in some true workforce development, was really exciting. So I'm hopeful that maybe we'll see something like this come to us again. But thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Minnick. Board Member Garcia.
Yes, so some of the questions have already been asked, but I didn't quite hear a response about the facilities. What happens to the facilities now that the school is closed? Is that a school property or I'm sorry, a district property or?
It's district
Mr.
property.
Scalar answer?
Yeah.
Sure, this is it's district facility. And so now that they are, I haven't had an opportunity to look at the written agreement, but usually in most charter school agreements that we have, or agreements that we have where we're providing district facilities to charter schools, there's a provision in there that if the school is revoked or if they are not renewed or if they voluntarily close, like in this situation, then the facilities use agreement becomes null and void and the property just reverts back to the district's use.
So we, I guess, inherit a vacant property.
It was always the district's property.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we get our property back. And I think I read in the agenda item that the school closed on August 30th. Is that correct?
Per the board's act, their board of
Got it.
directors action, they designated it to close on August 30th, correct?
But we still have students there. Or no more students?
Our understanding is that for the purposes of this school year, they have not been operating at all.
Okay, so where did they go?
So most, or several of these students, we have to remember that none of these students, or as far as we know, none of these students are under compulsory education. These are all folks who are 18 and older. We understand, and this has been part of the problem, has been the lack of communication coming from NorCal. But our understanding is that some of the students may have transferred to another high school offering similar services called Highland Community Charter School.
Okay, so there are no students at the school site because it's been closed since August 30th. So in terms of providing support to the families and the students, I'm missing.
How is that going to happen?
How is that going to happen if we don't really know where the students are? Because the school has been closed, so.
So with regards to the procedures, one of the requirements is that they need to provide us with a list of the students that were at the school, including contact information. And so it's with that list that we would use to reach out to families and to provide the support that they need.
Okay, well, that's good to hear that despite it not being a smoother process, there was going to be that attempt to locate the students and their families to make sure there's more communication on what happened, but also maybe where the programs that are available so that the students can go back and finish their programs elsewhere. So I just wanted to get clarification on the liabilities to the district in terms of outstanding debt or anything like that, that we are not going to absorb any of that. I just want to make sure that.
That's correct. I mean, basically what the law says is that a chartering a school district does not bear any of the liabilities, errors, or omissions of the charter school so long as the charter school the school district is providing all the appropriate oversight. And so Mr. Ramos is talking about providing oversight to make sure that the charter school is fulfilling its obligations to close the school, and we're overseeing that to make sure that they actually are fulfilling their obligations, then there should be no liability for the district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Garcia. I appreciate your point about the timeline. Unfortunately, both Board Member Vang and I have actually heard from students who have been disenfranchised by this school closure and seeking support. Board Member Morowski.
Be very brief, thank you. I also wanted to welcome you, Mr. Ramos, and thank you for the presentation. I wanted to acknowledge today that there was, charter school legislation signed by our governor. I'm sure you're tracking that. And just, for all of us to consider sort of how our district wields that new authority. And I wanted to ask you, is there a way that there's some professional development or training around kind of how best to design those policies in light of the new legislation? Or I don't know if you can speak to that. It may be very early, so if you want to bring that back, that's fine as well.
Well, definitely as a new employee and someone new to the world of charters, I'm actively seeking professional development. And I understand Mr. Scalar's office is actually going to be offering some training this month. And I hope to attend a training over at the Santa Clara County office as well. But yes, the legislation is creating a whole new ball game, and so whatever was our learnings in the past, we're going to have to update our knowledge of the impact of this new legislation.
Thank you. Board Member Wu, Vice President Wu.
Thank you. I would just admonish you to keep track of them very closely. I mean, you're at their side when you're collecting the paperwork. you're at their side when you close the doors. You want to be very, very careful, because I don't want to say that I don't trust them, but they are no longer in the charter business, and they are, for the most part, they are older, and so they have nothing to lose by walking away. So I want to be very close. This is not a typical charter.
So to clarify, Vice President Wu is asking that after this motion is voted on tonight, that you will be lockstep with NorCal Charter specifically, despite the fact we are moving towards dissolution.
I appreciate the words of caution, and we will definitely make sure that we are very careful in the monitoring of their closure. I will say I have not met the folks from the organization yet, and so I am looking forward to having the opportunity to meet with them and to, as I said earlier, to clarify the process for closing the school.
I do think it's worth noting for the record that Mr. Ramos has made several attempts to reach out, specifically to your point, Board Member Wu, and what other members of the board have expressed. It's been difficult. So yes. I do want to make sure that's a part of the public record, that the notion of us being tight with them, we're definitely very committed to that. But, in one example, Mr. Ramos actually had to reach out to the state to try and get an updated name, because there has been this kind of disconnect from the staff. So I do want to make sure that's understood, because Mr. Ramos is definitely taking this very aggressively and acting very urgently, but it is a tough partnership for us to manage. But that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to keep trying.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. We had a motion and a second. Student preferential vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any abstain? Any noes? Okay, the motion carries.
Moves it from conference to action.
Oh, okay, so we're taking.
Now we need action.
We're taking this item to action. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Student preferential vote. All those in favor? Aye. The motion carries. Item 12.0, the consent agenda. Item 12.1, approve grants, entitlements, and other income agreements. Do we have any public comment on this item? Item 12.1B, approving personnel transactions, no public comment. Item 13.0, future board meetings. Oh, yes, we have to adopt the consent agenda. Sorry, I came in late and I'm off my game. So we have a motion and a second. Student preferential vote. Thank you, Student Member Ng Olson. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Item 13.0, future board member dates, meeting dates and locations. Our next meeting will be held on October 17th. 4:30 p.m. closed session, 6 p.m. open session. Before I motion to adjourn tonight, I want to acknowledge that this evening, today actually, is the superintendent's birthday. I will not embarrass him by asking that the board sing off pitch from the dais happy birthday. But if everyone can join me on the count of 3 in wishing him a happy birthday. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday. Okay, wonderful. I will take a motion to adjourn. Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, we are officially adjourned.